just say, you can just give me the name and I'll be able to find them easier.
Yeah, I don't want to, like, the whole point of not just being me is to not divert. So I don't want us to go on rabbit trails talking about, things where I just want to concentrate on the topic as fast as possible. And, if I make, like, logical blunders or Tom makes logical, I want, people to kind of nail us and be like, okay, like, we're going off the rails.
All right, you wanted to give an intro, topic stuff? I'm live now, so you can...
I'll give an intro when time comes, yeah.
Yeah, go for it, like, right now.
Should we start already?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. So, Tofi, are you ready?
Yep.
I'm afraid you should be. All right, so we are here, and our current topic of discussion that we settled on, and I'm Canadian Catholic. If you guys can look me up on YouTube, Google search, wherever, just go youtube.com/Canadian Catholic. That's the easiest way to find out about me. I argue for theism, and theism is the proposition that at least one God exists. Currently, the discussion is going to be about whether it is reasonable for one to hold to theistic worldview, to theism. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not here to convince people. I'm not making a statement what you should believe or shouldn't believe, okay? So what I'm making a case for, and what we are going to be making a case for, is that theism is a reasonable and justifiable belief. So I am justified to be a theist, and we are justified to be theists. You can be an atheist and agree with us. You can be a theist and disagree with us. So that's not one of those. So that's basically going to be the constraint. So Tom, you want to give an introduction of what your stance is? Do you disagree that theism is, or what's the topic? Go ahead.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think theism is reasonable. I don't think there is any sufficient evidence or any evidence that would justify belief in the existence of a god. So I think theism is an unreasonable position, just like belief in Santa Claus or fairies or leprechauns is an unreasonable position.
Okay. All right, I see. All right, so should we dive straight into what I believe is the best way to approach the subject?
The way to approach with evidence, I would assume.
I mean, evidence there is not really clear because most of what I deal with is a priori reasoning. So, I mean, by evidence, do you simply mean a posteriori reasoning?
Well, so evidence, I mean anything that can differentiate imagination from reality. That's what I define that's my definition of evidence.
Okay, then I have no problem. Of course, I'm going to be using a priori deductive reasoning, okay? So, we're going to start out... Yeah, Tofi, you unmute at any time you feel like talking, right? We can't hear you if you're talking right now. You're muted. Okay. Do you guys have, like, server muted? Scotty, check it out. Yeah, so, I am a Roman Catholic, so you guys must be familiar. I use certain... Oh, sorry, Tofi's messaging me. Okay. So, yeah, so basically... I have used more or less traditional argumentation with notable modifications. So we're going to start with worldviews, okay? And we're going to show that one worldview has more theoretical virtue, or at least parts of it do. And I am saying that if we can show that the theistic worldview has more virtues, then I think that it's reasonable to accept it. And I hope all of you would agree with me. I hope... my mic's fine. Yeah. So let's start with a... oh, sorry.
One sec. I got to turn my volume down on my end because it's being too loud.
Yeah.
Testing. All right, that should be good. Now go.
All right, that's fine? Okay, good. All right, so I guess you guys are more or less familiar with traditional proof, so we're going to take that, and the foundational assumption of my worldview and my argumentation will be that a version, at least, of the famous principle of sufficient reason holds. And I give a couple of reasons for why this is the case, okay? So one of the reasons is that there are theoretical virtues for it, and one of the reasons is, one, it preserves our intuition, right? After all, our intuition tells us that our observation is not random. Second big reason is because it helps us with our epistemology, right? After all, how do we know that our beliefs are not random? And the whole process of evolution relies on some form of the principle, at least, because it uses inductive reasoning to assume that the smaller sample that we do observe can be generalized to the larger sample.
Wait, so just want to clarify here. You're saying the principle of sufficient reason is evidence of God.
No, that's not what I'm saying. By the way, Scotty, can you move Detroyer up to the stage too? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, Scotty, just move him up. No, I'm not saying that the principle of sufficient reason is the proof for God. What I'm saying is, Tom, some people are having trouble joining the stage. Is there anything you can do, Scotty? Yeah. So, principle of sufficient reason is our starting assumption to show the evidence for God. So, itself, the principle is not in any way proof for God.
I didn't ask about your assumptions. I don't care about your assumptions. Just tell me the evidence.
I mean, I was in the middle of presenting an a priori argument.
Okay, just give the argument. I don't need. So I need to just start with the nouns relevant to the argument. I don't need any of the presuppositions yet.
Okay, good. So my argument is that we can arrive using deductive reasoning to a necessary fact that explains contingent facts. And the best explanation, the most virtuous one, is that this necessary fact is personal rather than impersonal by using rules of inference. That's the short version.
Okay, why? Why would it be personal rather than impersonal? What evidence supports that?
The first fact, okay, so the first fact caused the first event, and I'm sure that most of us would agree here that the first fact was what caused the first event in the universe.
That doesn't make any sense. So the first fact would have to be the necessary thing exists. So that can't be what caused the universe. It has to be some second fact. The necessary thing has some property which makes it want to create something.
That's why I don't use the word universe. That's good. So it caused an event. The first necessary fact caused some event, correct?
Sure.
Okay, good. So then, if the first event began to exist, the first event, then it cannot be the effect of event causation, because there was the first event, and prior to that, logically, there couldn't have been a prior event. So it can't.
No. So an event would include the necessary being existing. That is itself an event. So you're saying
it cannot
contingent event. You're talking about contingent events. There can be necessary events that don't have a beginning. That's perfectly fine.
No, an event is something that materializes. Okay.
No. So your definition here doesn't matter. I don't care what you misconstrue the definition of event to be. An event there can be a necessary event. That is perfectly coherent.
Right, then we could just use our teleological argument, which is that the universe would have to be here if the cause is impersonal, either by necessity or chance, right?
Sure.
Okay, so which one do you defend?
Well, I'm happy with either one, but the same thing applies to the God. Either the God has to be there by necessity or chance.
No, that doesn't apply to God, because there is agency. Because there is a causation.
Well, either God necessarily has agency or it came about by chance. Which one is it?
I don't know what that means.
So God either exists with some properties, like he's an agent, he has some properties, and those properties are necessarily the case, he can't be otherwise, or it's a random collection of things that just happens to pop into existence or happened to exist in some way. So either God's nature is determined necessarily, has to be the case, or it's random.
No, that's not a true dichotomy, because I can believe that what functions within God is not a deterministic set of causes, right?
I don't know what that means. So either God has a necessary nature or a random nature. Those are the only possibilities.
What does it mean to have a necessary or random nature?
That it couldn't have been otherwise, or that it could have been otherwise.
Well, under that definition, everyone has a necessary nature, because nobody can be other than what they are themselves, right?
Well, no. So a necessary nature would be that it couldn't have been otherwise. The non-necessary nature means it could have been otherwise. So that's the random, the determined or random. Okay.
Now, you're just repeating what you were saying earlier. Okay. Now, every person is okay. So the law of identity says that something is what it is and cannot be what it cannot be. Okay. If you want to call that necessary, that's fine. Now, this is why I don't want to get off the rails. Okay. I just want to go back to the topic. Now,
well, this is the topic here. So as I understand your argument, you're saying that a personal cause of the universe is a better explanation than a non-personal cause of the universe.
Yeah.
And then you said that the universe either has a necessary existence or is caused by random chance if it's not caused by an agent. And so my response to this is that that same reasoning applies to a God. There's no difference here. Either God has a necessary existence and can't be otherwise, or came about by random chance, and either the universe has a necessary existence or it came about by chance. Those are the only two possibilities.
Yeah, but again, I don't like using the word universe. I don't like using the word universe, okay? Because universe, okay, universe describes the sum total of reality. Now,
Yes.
under that definition, God would be a part of the universe. So I don't want to use the word universe.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. So I would say that either a theistic God has a necessary existence or a random existence, or naturalistic pantheism has a necessary existence or random existence.
Let's try something else. Okay, let's go back to what I was originally saying. There was a first cause that caused the first event, correct?
Sure, we can accept that
All
for
right.
the sake of argument, but it's possible there's a past infinite. That's fine too.
That's fine. That's fine. We can get into that later. Now, if there is a first event that was caused, there can't be any logically prior events, correct?
No, false. There can be necessary events.
And it's not the first event.
The first event would be the necessary event, and it would be uncaused. And the first necessary event could cause future things. So no problem there.
Try this again. We have a first necessary non-contingent cause. Okay. Now, we have this cause causing the first event, correct?
Contingent event, yes. The first contingent event can be caused.
What does that mean?
There can be necessary events that are uncaused. Perfectly fine. Like,
okay,
this isn't like a super controversial point in philosophy. This is very, very simple. This isn't even a refutation of your position.
Okay, what do you define an event to be?
An occurrence in existence.
Reality. Okay, an occurrence. Okay, just an occurrence. I don't know what you mean when you say reality. Reality is, again, sum total of all that exists.
Yes.
Okay? Now,
an event is a thing that occurs or that happened in the sum total of reality. Yes. So
it occurs, it begins to occur, right? There's a beginning of something that occurs, correct?
No, there can be a perpetual occurrence. So necessary, not an issue here. So this is not in any way controversial. This is super simple. If you can't understand this, then you don't just understand basic philosophy. So yes, you can have necessary events. Right. This is not a refutation of your point.
Okay, we're just going to try this. If it's a necessary event, then it's not beginningless.
That's wrong. It can be beginningless and an event. There's not a contradiction. So again, Catholic, I don't care if you're too dumb to understand this. This is just a fact in philosophy. If you don't understand it, that's fine. Move on. I'm not refuting anything you're saying here. This is just a fact. Whether you'd accept it or not, I don't care.
Well, we're going to try this again.
Canadian, I'm going to kick you. Just move on. So there can be necessary events, no problem. If you don't understand that, you're dumb. This is not in any way, I'm not refuting anything in your position here. This is just a fact. If you don't know what they are, Google it. Don't waste my time on this. Like, bring up something relevant to your argument.
Okay, I'm just trying to explain something, right?
I don't care. I'm explaining this to you. I'm telling you this is the case. This is not a refutation of your position. This is not relevant to the debate. It's just a fact. If you don't accept it, I don't care. Move on to something relevant to your topic.
Yes, my topic is that agent causation better explains the causation from the first necessary fact rather than an impersonal cause.
Okay.
All right.
And evidence is what?
Okay, so there is theoretical virtues. Okay, now one what I'm doing is, even if you want to take that, if something is necessary, it seems like it cannot have indeterminate components. It cannot have indeterminate, because then it's not necessary. Indeterminate is something.
I've talked with Rob Coons, the expert on Thomism, like the world's leading expert. Is it possible there's multiple necessary things? Like, yes, there is. Yes, that's false.
Yeah, I don't think that there are multiple necessary things. Okay, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying if there is a... Okay, so we're talking about...
So wait, let me clarify it real quick. So when I say multiple necessary things, that means there can be a collection of necessary things. Like there could be a necessary proton, a necessary neutron, a necessary electron. You have a necessary hydrogen atom.
That's not what I'm disputing. I agree. That could be the case.
Okay.
What I'm telling you, if we take one of those necessary things, and it's non-contingent, then it cannot have an element of randomness in it, okay?
Randomness itself could be a necessary thing. That's also a possibility. So
no. Randomness is dichotomous with necessity. There can't be necessary randomness.
No, that's
okay?
also false. Again, I've been over this with actual experts in the field. You can't have randomness be necessary. Like in physics, randomness is a fundamental force kind of a thing that exists. It can be a necessary force. There's not a contradiction there.
no. Randomness is a dichotomous with necessity.
No, CC, that's wrong. I don't care what your opinion. This is just another fact. This is not. I'm not presenting anything to refute your position here. It's a fact. Randomness could be an essence kind of a thing that could exist fundamentally to the universe. This doesn't in any way refute your position. This is not relevant. This is just a fact.
Okay, so right. So let me try this again. Right, you are saying what is your defense? Okay, let me. Okay, just a second. Yeah. Okay. So let's try another view of this. Okay, let's try another view. We both agree that there is a necessary fact that explains contingent facts, at least traditionally, right?
Yes. Now, for the sake of the argument, I'm happy to grant that.
All right. Great. Okay, I'm fine with that. What stops you from describing it as a god?
Nothing. You could describe it as anything you want, but descriptions don't make the description itself reasonable to believe. Like I could describe it as a pineapple. That doesn't mean it's reasonable to believe it's a pineapple.
Okay. Do you believe that the observable universe was caused?
Yes.
Okay. You believe that the observable universe had a beginningless and timeless cause, correct? For the sake of argument.
Yes.
Okay. Are you willing to grant that it's also powerful?
Yes.
Okay. So it's a powerful. We have a powerful cause for the observable universe. Now, would you agree that the observable universe is material?
Yes.
So would you agree that the cause of it would have to be material?
No.
Okay. How is it material? What's the cause of matter?
Fields, interactions in fields, which are also technically a kind of matter in a sense. So there could be a material necessary thing which created contingent materials. There's no contradiction in that. So the beginning of the universe doesn't mean it has to be our observable universe does not mean all matter. It just means our observable matter. So even though our observable universe had a beginning, which means our observable matter had a beginning, that doesn't mean all matter had a beginning. That's composition division fallacy. So it's possible that the beginning of the universe was a necessary material thing. There's no contradiction there. I tend to think it's a field, but
I don't agree with you using the word universe because universe is simply describing some total of reality.
So again, observable universe. So every time I say observable universe, because that's the term you phrase, that just means the stuff that we can see. So our observable universe is material. Yes. Our observable universe had a beginning. Yes. Does that mean the beginning is immaterial? No, that's a composition division fallacy. The thing that created our observable universe could be a different material thing. There's no contradiction there.
Okay, good. But I'm taking material. When I use the word material, I'm describing the matter as we know it. So you agree that the first cause must be not of matter as we observe it, correct?
It can't be of matter in the universe, but it could be the same kind of thing outside of the universe. There's no contradiction there. So like there could be a hydrogen atom or a quantum hydrogen atom or something, and that caused our universe. So it could be the same kind of matter. It's just not the same as the matter in our universe.
Okay, good. So we're going to try this. If you believe that the first cause... Okay, so that is what I'm describing when I'm talking about immaterial, something not susceptible to our understanding of matter.
Wait, okay. So that I disagree with that. So it's perfectly susceptible to our understanding. When there's a beginning to our universe, obviously whatever caused our universe couldn't be a part of the thing it caused. It couldn't cause itself. So whatever caused our universe wasn't the same as the stuff in our universe. But it could be the same kind of stuff, but just existing prior to our universe. So for example, you could have an exact copy of our universe that's just made of the same kind of matter, and there's some necessary property to it or whatever, and it could create our universe. So it's the exact same material kinds of stuff, just a necessary kind of it. And so it could still be the same kind of matter. It's just not the matter that we have in our universe. So like a steel factory can make a steel car. They're both made of steel.
Is that matter itself contingent?
In our universe, yes. In outside of our universe, no.
Okay, how does that make sense?
It has a different property. It's the same kind of stuff with a different added property.
Okay, if it has different properties, it's not the same kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it has at least one different property, correct. But it could still be like hydrogen with an added property.
Okay, so then it's not hydrogen.
What? So no, it could be hydrogen with an added property. So, for example, you can have a hydrogen atom like ours, and it's contingent because of entropy or something, and then you take away entropy, and it's no longer contingent. It can be a necessary thing.
So what's the cause of that matter?
That would be necessary. That would be the necessary thing.
Okay, so you're saying matter is necessary.
It can be, yes. That's the point.
Okay, you're arguing that matter can be necessary.
Yes.
Okay, what's your argument for that?
Because anything could potentially be necessary. We don't know what the necessary thing is, and so we have no logical way to restrict what the necessary thing could possibly be. Necessary just means it has no beginning. It's existed essentially indefinitely outside of time for all time.
That's not what necessary means. Necessary means existing in all possible worlds, okay?
No, so that's false. So necessary, that's one interpretation of what necessary means. Which
I'm talking about logic, okay?
No,
I'm talking about...
Yes, I understand what you're saying. So that's one interpretation of what necessary means, which may or may not correspond to reality. So that's your hypothesis of necessary.
No, I don't understand what you're talking about. We're discussing modal logic here. Now, you have your own...
Again, modal logic is just a system of language. It's just a made-up idea in human heads. The actual context of what makes up the universe, the actual way the necessary thing is, may or may not be described by modal logic at all. Modal logic may or may not accurately describe the necessary thing. So you're presupposing your preferred definition of necessary, which may or may not be true. So as I've said, there could be a necessary material thing that isn't in all possible worlds. There could be a necessary thing that's different in each possible world.
Then it's not necessary. Then that's
again, this is one of the things I talked about with Rob Coons, one of the leading experts in the world. Yes, there can be different worlds with different necessary things in each possible world. There's no contradiction in that. You're presupposing your definition of necessary.
How do you define necessary then?
The fundamental nature of that particular reality, universe, whichever word you'd like to prefer.
What does that mean when you say that?
The thing that grounds the existence of that particular cosmos, universe. I don't know what word you'd prefer to use here. I'm going to use universe. Okay. I like universe.
Because you agree that there are possible worlds?
Possible worlds don't exist. I'm not an ontic modal realist. So I think that it's possible that the world could be in different ways, potentially.
Okay, good. So now, my idea, what I'm saying is that there is a fundamental part of the sum total of reality that exists in all possible worlds. Okay?
I would just reject that.
Okay, so you're saying that there's nothing that exists in all possible worlds?
Not necessarily, no. There could be something that's possible, and it's also possible there's not. It's possible there's different things in different worlds.
That's why I gave an argument, okay? I'm giving an argument that for you to have, you require something fundamental, okay? Fundamental that exists in all possible worlds to ground contingent facts. Otherwise, you're left with empirical skepticism, and thus a self-defeating epistemology. Okay. Now,
wait. Go back. I have no idea what you're saying there. So it's possible to have different worlds. Wait. So it's possible to have different worlds with different necessary things, and they don't have the same things in them.
That's a contradiction in terms. You can't have different. Because necessary fact is something that holds in all possible worlds.
No, so I already proved that wrong. So again, you can just check my conversation with Rob Coons. No, that is not the case.
Necessary. Then you're equivocating on necessary.
No. So you are presupposing your definition, which is wrong. So your definition is wrong.
Standard definition. I didn't come up with it. Okay, this is just standard.
Again, I've gone over this with experts in the field. You can check my YouTube channel. It is possible to have different necessary things in different worlds. They act as a different foundation. This is not a contradiction. If you don't know this, you're ignorant of philosophy. Again, this is not in any way trying to refute your position. It's just a fact. If you don't accept it, Google it.
Okay, so let's divide it in two ways. You're saying necessary in one sense. I'm using necessary in another sense. Now, my argument is that unless we accept necessary facts in the second sense, then you are left with empirical skepticism.
How so? Wait, why would that make a difference? So that's epistemology. Why would that make a difference to ontology at all? Like, who cares?
Because your ontological claims rely on you having some knowledge, right?
No, this isn't about... I'm not arguing that this is the case. I'm arguing this is a logical possibility. So it's possibly the case that there are different worlds. Each has a different necessary thing. I'm not saying this is the case here.
But then that means that brute facts exist.
Yeah, brute facts and necessary things are synonymous. There are brute necessities and brute contingencies.
Okay, just a second. Brute contingent facts exist on that world. If you're saying that there's a case that there isn't any part of the universe that exists in all possible worlds, then you're conceding that brute contingent facts do exist.
No, that's false. So there can be a brute necessity in two different universes, and they're two separate brute necessities. That's perfectly fine.
You can't have two contradictory brute necessities in different possible worlds. Okay,
there's not contradictory. So again, your definition of necessary is wrong. I've gone over this with the experts. You can check the actual videos where I've talked about this. Yes, it's possible to have multiple universes with different necessary things. No contradiction. There's not brute contingencies. You're just playing with semantics that are just wrong. And again, this doesn't have anything to do with the topic. You're disagreeing with my uses of the words. Doesn't make a difference to your argument.
Okay, the argument I'm making is without conceding something fundamental, you're left with empirical skepticism.
Yes, and I'm not following how anything you're saying is relevant here. So I'm saying that there is not something that is necessary in your use of the word that applies to all possible worlds. I'm saying that is false, or can be false. And so if we grant that that's false, we can have necessary things in each possible universe. How does that lead to universal skepticism? And why would that make a difference to the ontology of the fact of the matter?
Okay, because your whole induction process that leads you to atheism relies.
I didn't mention induction here.
What do you mean? You're using some inductive processes to argue for any belief, right?
No, I'm not using anything inductive here. I'm just saying it's a possibility. So there's this is a priori. Induction is a posteriori. So this is purely an a priori argument. It's possible there's two necessary things and two necessary universes.
Yeah, Tofi, go ahead.
I just was saying you don't have to use induction for every belief. But what is even the was a full argument presented at some point? And that's what we're debating.
No.
Debating here.
Yeah, I present an argument, and TJump concedes that there could be something fundamental to the universe, but he believes that necessity doesn't have to be hold in every possible world.
What do you mean by fundamental to the universe?
For example, you could have two different gods, and they both create their own essential universes.
And they're not necessary.
No, then they are necessary. So I'm saying, yep, there can be necessary. Your definition of necessary does not matter here. Again, talked about this with Rob Coons. Yes, it is possible. No logical contradiction to have multiple necessary things. Not a problem.
Okay. But what is the argument for theism that's being given?
Well, that's the part I'm asking about. He's saying that if we accept my definition of necessary, that there can be multiple necessary things, then this leads to radical skepticism, or empirical skepticism, I think is the term he used, which is epistemological, so I don't know why that matters to whether or not it's, or maybe he's saying that because I don't have, if that's the case, then I don't have a grounds for my epistemology, and so mine can't be rational, his can. I think that's the argument.
How does it have anything to do with theism?
I think his argument is that if you don't have a grounds for your epistemology, if it has some kind of flaw in it, then you don't have grounds for knowledge. Therefore, mine doesn't work, his does. I think that's the argument.
I thought we were supposed to be doing Canadian. Didn't you have a kind of cosmological argument?
Okay, mute your microphone. I gave a cosmological argument, and Tom accepts most of it. Okay.
Yeah, I can grant.
Can we just write it down in the chat and go through it premise by premise?
Yeah, we went through it, and Tom conceded that there could be something that's necessary for all universe to exist. No, so now I'm saying observable universe. I don't like the word universe because that just describes the sum total of reality. Now, if something caused some other material thing to exist, then the cause itself cannot be material, right?
No.
And Tom says that's wrong. It can still be material. And then I'm asking, is it contingent? Since you're agreeing that matter as we observe it is contingent, so why is it that this extra matter isn't contingent?
Because the matter that we observe doesn't necessarily represent all possible matter. So there can be other kinds of matter, which would include a necessary kind of matter.
Okay, what's your argument that matter is necessary?
It's a possibility. So we don't know everything about what necessary things are. It's possible that the necessary thing is a form of matter.
All right, so what do you have an objection to the cause of the universe not being material?
No, it's possible.
Okay, so then you're saying it is possible that it's immaterial, right?
Sure.
Okay, but do you know that according to S5, if something necessary is possibly the case, then it's necessarily the case?
I reject S5. It's stupid.
What?
Yeah, I don't use S5. I don't like it. So it's not. It's just a language. I don't care. So
what do you mean it's just a language?
It's just a language. So that's what modal logic, systems of logics are, just languages to represent your ideas and your arguments. They don't tell us anything about the way the universe is. So the fact that there may be possible universes, may or may not be, modal logic is just a possibility. It's just a hypothetical way to look at the world, nothing more. So I don't care.
You're saying that a necessary fact could possibly be the case. But if it could possibly be the case, then it necessarily is the case. Okay,
No,
according
that's
to
false.
S5
Yeah,
modal logic.
that's just false. It's possible. That's no.
Okay,
Like, we can
so-
imagine possibilities which may not actually be possible. There could be one necessary universe, and that's all there is, and there's
Are you
literally nothing
familiar with
else.
S5 modal logic?
Some, yes, I've talked about it multiple times. Gone through and
Okay.
shown that this is not relevant. So again, nothing referencing S5 can provide no evidence here.
Yeah, I don't understand what you're saying evidence to be. I mean, I'm providing a priori arguments for why it's reasonable to accept God. You're saying that God is possible.
Yes, God is possible. So is not God. Not God is also possible.
Okay, but do you understand if something necessary is possible, then
It's
it's
false.
possible, then it necessarily exists?
So there's a contradiction in that definition of using those words in those ways. It's because can it be possible that there is a God? Yes. Can it be possible there is no God? Yes. But if both are possible, then it leads to a logical contradiction. So
You're saying that God exists in some possible worlds.
and it's
Wait,
and
that's
no God
obviously not a
exists in some possible
within
worlds.
the definition. That's just it's just obviously the case that saying possibly necessarily X and possibly necessarily not X is a contradiction. But it's not the definition that's a contradiction.
Yeah, I didn't say the definition. The definition here is the problem of using that in that way provides a contradiction, because
So
in the
provide-
definition of modal logic,
it
same
entails
possibility
that
for
what you
X and
said is
possibility
a
for not X.
contradiction.
So again, not in any way. This is very, very obvious. Is it possible God exists? Yes. Is it possible God does not exist? Yes. Both can exist in possible worlds. So I don't care what you try to presuppose in your silly definitions of modal logic here. Both are possible, equally possible.
I mean, what do you even mean by possible then?
There is a world in which there is a God. There is a world in which there is not a God. Both are possible. Both could exist.
No, there can't be a necessary fact.
Yeah, wait, hang on.
So again, I don't care about your stupid word games
Hang
with
on,
modal
hang on.
logic. It is possible that there is a God in a universe, and there's possible there's another universe with no God.
Stop. You've just like committed yourself to like some sort of possible world semantics. But if we use that, then it's like clear that S5 is true, right? Because
No,
if
S5 is a way to analyze things. Yes, we can use ways to analyze things, but whether or not that ways to analyze things accurately correspond to reality is irrelevant here.
if
So
you
again,
accept-
referencing
Stop
S5
talking.
does nothing. It's just irrelevant. It's irrelevant.
Yeah,
So
you're wrong.
is
Stop
it
talking.
possible there is a universe with a God? Yes. Is it possible there's a
Talk.
universe with no God?
Why are you
Yes.
still talking?
Present an argument.
Listen, if you're committing to
I'm
possible
not going to play this stupid word game. I don't give a shit about S5 logic. It's possible there's a universe with a God. It's possible there's a universe with no God. Provide
Okay,
some
but
kind of
you're-
evidence.
Why you're wrong.
God is a necessary fact. If it's necessary that it can't exist.
I don't
in
give
some
a shit about your semantics. It's
You
possible there's a
all
universe
stop.
with a God. It's possible there's a universe with no God, or with a different necessary thing with no necessary thing. Yes, those are possible.
Nonsense instead of letting me finish a sentence. Shut up.
Bitch, this is
come on,
my
son.
server. I will kick your ass out of here. You shut the fuck up.
Oh,
Get the fuck out.
oh my gosh, Tofi. All right.
All right. So answer the question. As I
Okay,
said,
we're-
it's possible there's a universe with a God. It's possible there's a universe without a God. Necessary things. Don't care. I don't care what your silly definition of necessary things are.
Okay, so once again, God is a being that exists in all possible worlds.
He's
You're
not.
saying that. Okay, then you're saying that there is no possible world in which God exists.
No, there's possibly a God in one and possibly a different necessary thing
And
in
it's not
another.
God, because God is one that exists in all.
Your definition. I don't care about your definition here. So your definition is just the thing
I
that you
worship
made up.
God. So what are you arguing against? You're arguing against the God I don't worship.
No. So I'm saying it's possible to be the case that there is a God, your God, in a universe.
It's not a God. It only exists.
Stop.
Then it's not a God.
Stop.
Okay.
So stop. So I'm saying that it's possible that your idea of a God, the Christian Yahweh, exists in one universe as a necessary thing, and a different necessary thing exists in a different universe. That's
Then
perfectly
that's
logically
not a
consistent.
necessary fact. That's not a necessary fact.
Yes, so that doesn't incur your definition of necessary, which means
I
you
don't,
don't
okay?
understand the concept. So that's fine.
Now,
So
okay,
I don't
you are-
care. So again,
Okay,
wait, stop, Canadian, stop, stop. So I'm rejecting your definition. I'm saying that your definition is not
Okay.
possible. Your definition is stupid. I don't
Okay,
care about
good.
your definition. It's possible
Now
that your
you-
God exists in one universe and no other universe.
Right, that's good. Now I'm going to ask you. Now, do you understand that now you're committed to saying that my Christian God cannot exist? Not that it possibly doesn't exist, but that it cannot exist.
No,
Do you
again,
understand?
I don't have to do that at all, because I can say it is possible there is a necessary being. Wait, stop, Canadian, shut up, and let me finish, or you're getting
That
muted.
necessarily
Canadian,
follows.
shut up, or you're getting muted. So it is possible that there is a necessary being named God in all possible universes. That's possible. It's also possible that's false. It's also possible that it doesn't exist in all possible universes, which means your definition is wrong. Your definition.
Okay, so you're logically incoherent now. Okay, can I explain why?
Go for it.
Now, if what I'm trying to show you is that there's a true dichotomy here. I'm not trying to.
I understand the argument.
You're not letting me talk now. Okay, I let you finish. I just appreciate a minute. Okay, now. I'm not trying to debunk you yet. All I'm trying to do is show you what your view entails. I don't care whether you care about logic. I'm simply showing the audience what they went. I need to finish, okay, please. Now, you are saying that a necessary fact, necessary being, or whatever you want to call it schmecessary, I don't care, a being that exists in all possible worlds that I believe possibly exists. Now, if you concede this, then you're conceding that God necessarily exists. Thus, to maintain atheism, you have to argue that such a being cannot exist in any possible world.
So that's wrong. That's immediately wrong. So what I can say that
you're logically committed to this view.
No, that's wrong, Canadian. Let me explain it to you, because again, I've talked with experts in the field. Canadian, stop, or I'm going to mute you. So I can say it's possible that there is the Christian God could exist in all possible worlds. That is a possibility, yes. And then I can take all of modal logic and say, we're going to put that into a set and say this one set where all possible universes there is a God could be false, and it's not there. And there could be a different set of all possible universes in which this thing does not exist. Both of those sets are possible.
Okay, we're still stuck in this. Okay, so
so where's the logical contradiction in saying there is, of all possible worlds, it's possible there is a necessary thing in all possible worlds, but it's also possible it's in none of them. Both of those are possibilities.
Okay, what? Okay, if you're saying that it's possible that a necessary being doesn't exist, you're saying that necessary being cannot exist.
Wrong.
That's what it.
Wrong. Again, wrong.
That's what
you saying it's possible. You saying it's possible that there is a necessary being just means there is a chance it exists, not necessarily exists. As I've just demonstrated, it is possible that there is a necessary being in all possible worlds, and it's possible there's not. Both of those are possibilities. You're using the word possible in a semantic game, applying it to S5 logic, which is just irrelevant. Again, this doesn't in any way support your argument. You're just playing semantic games here, which isn't evidence. You have to address the actual argument. Why is it not possible that there is no necessary being in all possible worlds? And you can't say the definition, because we don't care about the definition here. Why is it ontologically impossible for there to not be a necessary being in all worlds, when it is clearly logically possible to have different necessary beings?
Because if there is no necessary fact that explains contingent facts in all possible worlds, then we're stuck with either brute contingency ad infinitum, which would be causal infinitism, which has logical problems with it.
Well, that's not a problem at all. But I'm remember what I said before is it's possible there's multiple necessary things. So there could be each possible world has a different necessary thing. They're not the same thing.
Okay, then we're not talking about the same thing, okay? What I'm talking about is that there's a fact that exists in all possible worlds.
Yes.
Okay?
No, Canadian, I understand what you're saying. I'm saying if that could be false, if there is a different alternative, this is not the one you accept. I'm not saying you accept this. I'm saying there is another alternative, which is that there are multiple necessary things in each possible world, or one necessary thing per possible world, which are different necessary things, in which case you do not need a necessary thing in all possible worlds to ground the existence of contingent things in any possible world, because they all have one, they're just different necessary things. So they can all explain contingent things. You don't need one necessary thing to explain contingent things, because each individual necessary thing can explain the contingent things in that universe just fine.
Okay, we're not using the same language. I'm going to try this again.
I know.
Okay, so let's agree. I'm gonna make a jump. Okay, I'm gonna adopt your language. So, what do you want to call something that exists in all possible worlds? Because before this, I was calling it necessary, but you're saying that that's not what necessity is. That's fine. What do you want to call a fact that exists in all possible worlds?
I wouldn't call it anything. I just call it a possibility.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, let's give it N1. Standing for my definition of necessity, okay? Something that exists in all possible worlds, okay? N1. That's what we're gonna call it. Is that fine?
Sure, yeah. And then they'll be like N2, N3, and 4. Fine.
Okay, so my argument is, and we're gonna call contingency according to my definition C1. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so N1 is something that exists in all possible worlds. C1 is that which exists in some possible worlds. Now, my argument is that if we do not accept N1, then we're either okay. So if we don't accept N1, then we're either rejecting the PSR, which again,
wait. So let me try to streamline. So you're saying, wait.
I wasn't.
Wait, I know. I want to try to like see if I'm understanding this correctly. So you're saying if there's no N1, there can be nothing but C's.
If there's N1, yeah. So what I'm saying is either there will be, if there is not at least one N1, then there is always going to be C's, which is causal infinitism.
Right. So my rebuttal to that is that there could be an N2, N3, N4, N5, and 0 N1. So there's 0 N1s, there's an N2, N3, N4, N5, and 6, all in different universes.
Okay, and that's not an N in my definition, right?
Yeah, so that's why it's not an N1. Remember, we're saying N1 is your definition. N2, N3, and 4 are my definitions. And
N2 and 3, okay, N2 and 3 and 4 don't help you. Because N2 on your definition is C1 on mine. Now, if something exists,
so you'd have to explain that more. So I'm saying that I have multiple necessary things. They're not created. None of them are created.
We mean something different when we say that. Now, I am saying this. Yeah, can you get Detroit back on stage? Scotty, yeah. So let me try this again. Now, yeah, get Detroit back on stage if he's on. Yeah. Wait, is Venus on? Yeah. Can you get Venus on there too, Scotty? Venus. Okay, get Detroit in 10 minutes, Scotty. Get Venus on. Sorry, Tom. Yeah, let me try this again. So the point is, we're using the same terms. Scotty, get Venus up. It's like some strange character says Venus. Venus, you need to accept it. Yeah. So, Tom, let's try this slowly. So, when we're using the same terms, we mean different things. This is what complicates.
Yes, I've already agreed to this. You're using N1 for necessary in all possible worlds. I'm using N2 for necessary in a possible world. N3 and necessary in a possible world.
So your N2, yeah. So your N2 corresponds to my C1. Okay.
Yes. So I'm saying your definition is wrong. This is a logical possibility. Your definition is wrong.
Okay, that's okay. It's not that the definition is wrong. It could be that that's not the case. That's fine. Okay, that's fine, right? I mean, I'm defining. I could be defining it one way, and it could not be the case. I don't see where the definition is wrong. You could be arguing that that's not the case. But what I'm saying is, if that's not the case, if you do not have a fact, okay, that exists in all possible worlds, which I call N1, or generally call necessary, then you have nothing that exists in all possible worlds. But if you don't have at least something that exists in all possible worlds, there's two options. One option is that there is causal infinitism, which there are problems with, or that there are just brute facts, the fact that the PSR isn't true. And if PSR isn't true, that also has problems for you.
So again, I've already addressed this. So you haven't in any way come close to addressing my rebuttal to this. You said you need N1, a thing that exists in all possible worlds, and without this, you have these consequences. I'm saying, no, I can avoid all of those consequences by having a necessary thing which is not necessary in all possible worlds, but is necessary in each individual world that has a specific necessary thing. So it does not require the property of all possible worlds here to be necessary. That's what I'm saying. It does not require that. There could be an uncaused creator of the universe in each universe, and there's no logical contradiction there. Why would having like the Christian God just exist in one universe and create just this universe and no other universe, and then
we went over this, okay?
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. So you need to explain why that if we have different gods in different universes, this is a bad thing, or this stops us from having knowledge.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You're not talking about my God at that point.
I don't care if I'm talking about your God. If this is a possibility, then your God is not necessary. So that's the point. So you have to explain why in your argument, if this is the case, if it's the case that there's a different God in each universe and they're all necessary things individually and not from one super necessary thing, why does this lead to the consequences that you are arguing that we have? Because we can still have knowledge in those cases.
Okay, I'm telling you, if there's only brute facts, if brute facts exist...
I'm not asking about brute facts here. I'm saying if there's different gods. There's Christian God exists, Muslim God, or the Vishnu God, the Hindu God exists.
Why? God can exist.
I don't care. This is just semantics. So you can pick different gods. Pick the Norse gods. I don't care. Different gods in different universes. Why does that stop us from having knowledge?
Well, the knowledge is only going to be a problem if there is brute facts, which I mean,
I didn't say anything
I don't
about brute
know.
facts. I said there's multiple gods. There's one God in each universe. Why does that stop me from having knowledge?
But I didn't say that that would stop you from having knowledge. What I said is, if there is nothing that's necessary, you only have two options.
I don't no. So go with my example. There's different gods, different universes. What are the
Okay.
two options, and how do the two options apply to this
Okay.
case?
Okay, I'm going to explain to you. Then those gods exist in some possible worlds.
Sure.
Okay, good. Now, if those gods exist in some possible worlds, there isn't a god that exists in all possible worlds.
Sure. That would be the point. Yes.
Okay, good. So if there is no god that exists in all possible worlds, what is it that's necessary in the first sense?
The God in each world is the necessary.
Okay, that's necessary in the second sense. I'm asking you in the first sense. What's necessary in the first sense? Something that exists in all possible worlds.
Nothing. That was the point. I said that's not.
If there's nothing that's necessary, then we're back again. You either
Yes,
have...
why? That's the point you're supposed to explain here that I've been asking them multiple times.
Only
Where is the
only two
problem?
options.
Where is
Okay,
the
it's just-
problem with having different gods in different worlds with no necessary thing in all possible worlds? Why does having no necessary thing in all possible worlds prevent any problem at all? Doesn't seem to cause any problem as far as I can see.
Because you either have causal infinitism or PSR doesn't hold.
Wrong. PSR can hold just fine. Each one of those gods is uncaused.
Okay,
So each one of the wait, stop. Let me explain.
Then you're stuck with causal infinitism. Okay? You're stuck with causal infinitism.
No, that's wrong. So again, the PSR can
You
hold. So
have two options. That's the
stop,
only
Canadian,
option,
stop,
okay?
stop. So
You're
we
not
can
getting
stop,
off the hook.
stop or
You're
get
not
muted.
getting off the
Stop
hook.
or get muted.
Okay.
So we can grant the PSR. We can say the PSR is true. I don't, but we can do that for the sake of the argument. PSR is true. Each possible world has its own god, and the PSR ends with each of the gods. They're all uncaused. You don't need one necessary thing in all possible worlds to grant the PSR. The PSR does not say that. You can have
Okay, good.
independent necessary things in each world and still have the PSR hold.
Okay,
So what you're
okay,
saying
good.
does not
That's fine.
follow.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You're just stuck with causal infinitism then.
No, there's causal infinitism
is
means
it?
that there is an infinite set of causes. That's not the case.
Okay, what is it that where does it all bottom out?
It doesn't. There's individual starting points. There's a bunch of individual starting points.
If it doesn't bottom out, it's causal infinitism.
No, that's wrong, you idiots. So I can have two.
You're being causal, okay?
So
I'm not letting you know.
No. So I'm
Okay?
answering the question. Let me answer the question, Canadian. So if you have two gods, both of those are the starting point of all causes in their own universe, and both are uncaused. That's
That
a
ties them
stopping point.
together. You know what we call that? If we have two different ones that are uncaused and don't exist in all possible worlds, that's just a brute contingent fact.
No, it's not. They're necessary facts. Both of these are necessary. So again, I don't care about your silly definitions, Canadian Catholic. I don't care about your silly definitions. Tell me where the problem is with this scenario. We have
Okay,
just
the problem
two worlds.
is that in that world, you're tied to global skepticism.
How? That's the thing I've been asking for the past hour.
Okay,
How?
I'm gonna show you how. So let's say you accept evolution, right? Why do you accept evolution? You accept evolution because of induction processes. Induction process is you take certain pieces and analyze the evidence.
You lost me. Wait.
Let me finish.
Forget.
Yeah.
Well, you've totally lost me. So forget evolution here. Just say God created us, and He's standing there saying, "Hey, yo, I created you." And one is the Christian or whatever God, and one is the Hindu God. So there's no evolution here. Just I believe it because God told me so.
Again, you're just not letting me explain. You're just cutting in whenever I'm in the middle.
Yeah,
now,
I want to get rid of all the because remember you said we want to get rid of all the don't go down the trails. I don't want to say anything about evolution here. Just say God told me so, and I believe it because God told me so.
Okay, again, everything would have to be defined, right? You're saying that where it bottoms out is at a fact that doesn't exist in all possible worlds.
Yes.
That's what normal people call brute contingency, and that's a problem for you.
No, it's a brute necessity. Brute necessities are fine. So
No.
explain why this is a problem. Get rid of all your silly language. Explain why I can't know something if God created everything in my universe.
So how do you know that your beliefs aren't brutally contingent?
God told me so.
Okay, how do you know that belief that God told you so?
He's the
itself?
necessary being and created everything in my universe.
Yeah, but your necessity isn't necessity because it doesn't exist in all possible worlds.
That doesn't seem to make any difference. It doesn't matter if it exists in all possible worlds. He's still an eternally existing God.
How do you know that your beliefs aren't also brute contingent facts?
Well, they are. God put them in me, so I'm
Okay,
contingent facts.
if they are, then there is no causal relation between reasons you have for believing something. So you can't be justified in believing it.
I'm
Okay?
contingent, so I'm a contingent being, and the necessary being created me. So I'm.
Okay, that's a belief you have. How do you know that belief isn't brutally contingent?
What, I don't understand
Okay.
what you're saying here. So
You understand it perfectly. I'm going to ask again. How do you know that the belief that God told you something in this world isn't itself brutally contingent?
I'm not sure what you mean by brutally contingent here. So all of my beliefs are contingent on God creating me.
Okay, just a second. That it doesn't exist in all possible worlds, but it also didn't begin to exist. Whatever you call brute necessity.
That's how do I know the God didn't begin to
Let
exist?
me try this again. How do you know that the beliefs you have are not something that you're just not letting me finish?
I don't understand what you're saying. So what I believe doesn't make a difference here. The question is, so there's a necessary being. He created me and he told me stuff.
That's a belief.
Yes.
Okay, so how do you know that belief that someone told you something isn't itself something that's brutally contingent?
It was told me by a necessary being.
But again, your necessity is something that exists in some possible worlds.
Doesn't in any way refute the argument here. So you haven't shown a contradiction here. I can believe that my beliefs.
That's just brute contingency.
No, so you've shown no contradiction here. So I can believe that there's a necessary being. He's told me this. Perfectly fine. Where's the contradiction?
Detroit, go ahead.
I want to maybe try to help clear something up because, Tom, it seems to me that you're willing to use modal logic and you have even sort of possible world semantics. It seems fine to you. But what sort of system you have in mind, if you do, it seems a little bit confused. And so maybe it would help.
Well, I don't really care about the systems
clear.
here. So all I'm interested in is where is the contradiction in what I've said? Why would a necessary being, different necessary beings that aren't in all possible worlds, but are the grounding foundation?
It's not a necessary being.
But hang on.
So where is the contradiction here with a God who created this universe and a different God who created that universe? And why would I have less of a grounds of... Stop.
But that's the point, right? Whether the contradiction depends on the logic we're using, right?
No, not really. Not really in this case. Because I'm not talking about the semantics here. I don't care about the semantics.
Oh my gosh, this guy doesn't know.
Stop. So all I'm asking is mute Canadian. Just mute Canadian. I've got to finish my sentence here. So what I'm asking here is, so let's say we have multiple gods who create multiple universes. The way I get knowledge in this universe is the same way Canadian Catholic thinks he gets knowledge. His necessary being tells him. Now, obviously, this is stupid. You can't get knowledge that way. You can't ground it at all. And so the point I'm making here is that any type of justification he proposes that he gains from this necessary being telling him is also gained by a necessary being that's only in one possible world telling its occupants. There's no difference there. There's no greater or lesser value. There's nothing lost or gained in this scenario. Now, I don't care what semantics you use. Demonstrate the functional difference between the knowledge in these two universes.
Right. Okay, so I'm not making a case that necessary being tells me anything. The point I was making is, if you allow brute contingent facts, I
don't care about your semantics here. Tell me why having a necessary being in all possible worlds tell you something is stronger than a necessary being in one possible world telling you something.
I'll explain. Scotty, can you bring up Scrungy? He's also a logician. Scrungy. Tom, let me clarify something, okay? So I think you think that I'm using a precept argument. So I think that's what we're confused.
To be fair, I want to be fair here. I'm not trying to call you a precept here. What I'm saying is I'm making a contrast between that worldview. And so if you say, it seems like what you're saying is that knowledge gained from a being that's...
No, that's not what I was making. See, again, I understand why the confusion arose. I'm not trying to tell you that unless a necessary being tells you something, you can't know it. That's not what.
Right. That's not the argument I'm making here. So I'm just using that as an example here. So some way. Wait. So let me try to finish. So it seems like you're claiming that a necessary being in all possible worlds acts as a foundation of knowledge, whereas a necessary being in one world doesn't act as a ground of knowledge. And I'm asking why. What is the functional difference?
That's not what I was making. Scotty, bring up Scrungy. Let me try again. Detroit, go ahead.
I think Canadian's point there is that it's not that the being itself is what grounds the knowledge necessarily. I mean, it might be relevant, but I thought the idea was if there is no necessary being in the way that Canadian is using necessary, then the principle of sufficient reason is false in the way that he is defining it. And if that's false, then we can't justify a wide range of things we claim to know. So that's the sort of argument that he's making.
Yes, and so I'm asking, which I've asked the same thing, and which should be obvious to everyone. Why can't we have a world where there's multiple necessary beings who just ground that one universe? Why does that act as a less sufficient ground of knowledge? I don't care about your definitions. Like, you can define knowledge as whatever you want. I don't care. What functional difference is there that I have a less sufficient grounds of knowledge in my case than your case? I don't care about your definitions. I do not at all care about your definitions.
Because on your world, you're conceding that there are brute facts.
Which I don't like. One, no. Well, actually, yes. So necessity and brute facts are the same thing in my case. A necessity is a kind of brute fact. But wait. I don't care about, again, Canadian, I don't care about your definitions. I can say, okay, there are brute necessary facts. Boom. How does this make in any way my claim to knowledge different from yours? Where is the weakness here?
Look, I can only use the English words, right? I can't use any other words. Right?
I'm talking about specifically the modal logic language. I don't need any modal logic language here for an argument. What I'm claiming is, why is the claim to knowledge in my case different from the claim to knowledge in your case? Claiming that you accept brute facts, I don't care what you define brute facts.
I'm going to answer this once again. In your case, you're conceding that brute facts exist.
Not an argument. That does not in any way refute my knowledge at all. There's zero refutations there. What is the refutation of my knowledge in this case?
The refutation is that brute facts undermine your claims to knowledge, rationality.
How? You should have just started with that. I don't even know what that means.
Started with, if you concede brute facts, then you have a problem because you can't use induction anymore. Your induction relies on you, for example, at least presupposing that your beliefs aren't brute. Right? But you can't make that presupposition that there could be brute facts.
No, God could be a brute fact. John, I don't even need to reference induction here. Induction has nothing to do with this. Like, what?
You're not talking about God. You're talking about a schmont, right? You're talking about a being that doesn't exist.
Your definitions here don't make a difference. If God exists, I don't need induction. God told me so. That could be sufficient.
Yeah, but God telling you so is your belief. How do you know that that's not brutally contingent?
Doesn't make a difference. Like how do you know your belief that God is necessary isn't wrong or isn't brutally contingent?
Because you have a brutally contingent fact.
How do you know that your personal belief that God is a necessary being in all possible worlds isn't a brute contingent fact?
Because brute contingent facts do not exist on my view.
So you have an idea, you have a belief that they don't exist, therefore they can't exist. Great.
Well, I'm saying, okay, no, what I'm saying is because of these theoretical virtues, brute facts ought to be rejected.
But that seems like a separate argument.
But if you reject brute facts, then you either are stuck with causal infinitism or you bottom out at a fact that
I already showed that that's not the case. So go back to what you just claimed. You claimed that if you some kind of virtues say that we should reject brute facts or something?
Yeah, because okay, yeah. So theoretically, Scotty, did you bring up Scrungy? Yeah. So what I'm saying is that the worldview, we have two worldviews, right? One worldview is brute facts don't exist, PSR holds. The other is there are brute facts. I'm saying that there are theoretical virtues, and because of this theoretical virtues, we ought to reject the worldview that accepts brute facts and accepts the worldview that rejects them.
Okay, that would be an argument. Present the argument for that.
Well, the point of theoretical virtues is to not use. So, okay, so there's ways to present arguments, right? What I'm saying is that it's not always best thing to just spout out arguments. Some other views, like Graham Oppie, I'm sure you know him, presents a different venue of convincing people, which is, or at least providing justification, which is to compare worldviews and their theoretical virtues. I'm saying we have worldview one. Here are the theoretical virtues. It preserves our rationality. It gives us epistemological grounds. It doesn't underlie induction, and it's something that we would expect, right? So I'm saying these are the theoretical virtues, and we ought to reject brute facts. Now, what is your objection to that?
I have no idea what that even means. So you're claiming that your worldview makes better sense, therefore we should accept your worldview from the perspective of your worldview. It sounds very circular to me. I don't see an argument there. No, I didn't follow the argument. You said there are virtues. My worldview is virtuous. Let's accept my worldview. Like, that doesn't sound like an argument.
But we just showed that your worldview fucks up your epistemology.
You didn't show anything.
Yeah, but I just showed you that you cannot justify why your beliefs are improved.
No, you didn't. You didn't explain that at all. You just keep saying it.
No, I did show you.
No, you didn't. I debunked that by saying, "Oh, here's an alternative that doesn't have that necessary thing, which has equal justification for knowledge." You nowhere
No, it
explained
doesn't.
why that doesn't
No, it
work.
doesn't. If you concede brute contingent facts,
You never
you're
explain.
at
Again,
this
you keep saying that. You never explained how this in any way works. Like, no, I can say there are brute necessity facts. There are brute contingent facts. There are brute facts. Perfectly
So
fine.
you
God's
have
a
a
brute
fact.
facts.
So you have a fact. Okay, so you have natural facts that are brutally contingent. What distinguishes facts that are brutally contingent from facts that are explained?
Ooh.
How,
One
how
has
can
a
you
cause and one
how can
doesn't.
exactly? So how can you distinguish the ones that do have a cause from the ones that don't?
Well, if there's a necessary thing, it can tell me.
But on your view,
No,
there
they're
is
brute
not.
necessity. So I can say there's a brute necessity in each possible world. Doesn't need to be in all
Okay,
possible worlds.
but your definition of brute necessity is no different than standard brute contingency.
So again, I don't care about your definitions here. So my question, again, all you keep doing is saying, "Oh, but your definition is different." I don't care. Like, you have to show why having a different necessary thing that was uncreated in all possible worlds
It's not
doesn't
necessary.
count.
That's the point.
Again, I don't care about your definitions, Catholic. I don't care about your definitions. They're not an argument. You giving your preferred definition isn't an argument. You have to
So now
show
you're not-
why logically that having a necessary thing that created each possible world.
Because it's not
Wait,
necessary.
stop, Canadian. Again, that your argument fails. Every time you say that, it fails. So again, you have to show why having what I call a necessary thing that is uncaused and created the entire universe for each universe is less of a good grounds of knowledge or whatever than your worldview. And you haven't done that. You've just said, "Oh, well, you accept brute facts." Not an argument. Present an argument that my case doesn't give us as much knowledge as
All right,
yours.
let's try this. What's the difference between what you call necessary in
I
one
don't care
possible
about your
world?
definitions. You can't ignore your definitions. Tell me why a God in each universe, that each God is completely uncaused and exists outside of space-time eternally with no reference to one another. How is that less of a grounds of knowledge than your case where there is one God in all possible worlds? Why is that
Because you can't
different?
Because then, on that view, you're conceding that there could be brute contingency.
Which doesn't in any way refute my knowledge. Doesn't show that my knowledge is any better or worse than yours.
It undermines your induction process. It undermines your induction process.
In no way. You have shown that in zero ways.
Okay, so I can just show you like hundreds of ways. I mean, I keep notes.
Show me
on
one.
them.
Pick. Go. Give me evidence.
Okay, evolution. You can't believe in evolution if you concede necessary fact, brute contingent.
I never mentioned evolution in my argument. I could say, let's just say there's no evolution. God just popped me into existence. Okay, where is my knowledge weaker than yours?
Okay, that fact that God poofed you into existence is your belief. How
It's
do you
no
know
more
that?
or less supported than your belief that your God is necessary. Why is one different than the other?
Because one view has theoretical virtues and the other doesn't.
Which are, again, we're going back to the same thing I asked like 5 minutes ago.
One undermines induction, the other doesn't. One is intuitive,
That's circular.
the other.
You've mentioned those as your leading conclusion to the values thing. Now you need to use the values to support something else. Like, what supports the values thing?
I don't understand the question.
So you said your worldview is undermined because mine has a necessary thing in all possible worlds, yours doesn't. And because of that, yours doesn't have the ability to make induction or whatever. And the reason we should adopt your worldview is because of values. And then you said, well, the reason we should adopt values is because you can't do induction. But that's circular reasoning.
I'm not talking about values. I'm talking about theoretical virtues. Okay,
Virtues. My bad. So virtues instead of values. Yeah. Dyslexic. So your argument is that I have a necessary thing in all possible worlds. You have a necessary thing in some possible worlds. Mine is better because you lose induction. And we should adopt my worldview because I have virtues and yours doesn't have virtues. And the reason mine has virtues is because you lose induction, which is circular. You've justified your conclusion with the premises in your argument.
Yeah, let's try this again. I'm going to try this again. There's two worldviews, okay? This is one worldview is where you have a principle of sufficient reason and you do not have...
So we're done with your silly language. One worldview, necessary thing in all possible worlds. One worldview, multiple necessary things in different possible worlds. Show me the difference.
Okay, the difference is that on one worldview, okay...
You lose induction. You've already said that.
No, I'm going to repeat this. On one worldview, you concede that there could be brute contingents. There are brute contingents.
Irrelevant.
Not that okay, that's the whole point.
So you haven't shown how this is in any way relevant to the conversation. Your argument is so again. So I'll go through it again. You say there's a necessary thing in all possible worlds. I say there's a necessary thing in many possible worlds, different necessary things. You're saying mine is wrong because I accept brute facts, brute contingent facts, or whatever, and because of that I lose induction. And you're saying the
Look,
reason we should accept your position is because it has virtues,
Yeah,
and the virtues are
yeah,
the
I'm-
things
I'm
you
making-
just
I'm-
listed.
yeah.
You're using the premises in your arguments.
I'm giving an objective. Okay, I'm giving an objective case. Like I said, I'm giving two worldviews. I'm saying one of those worldviews has these virtues. The other lacks those virtues. Now, why is it that reasonable people shouldn't side with a worldview that offers a lot of more virtues and has better?
That's the part I'm asking about. Where are these virtues? You just keep asserting that there are these virtues that yours has that mine doesn't. I've seen zero of them.
Okay, one is that we would expect the world to look different if there were contingent facts. Why do not?
Wait, what?
Why do we not?
Explain that? What do you mean?
Okay, why do we not see the violation of the PSR more often?
Law of physics. We'll go with that.
What?
Like, I don't even know where to begin with that. Like, I don't think the PSR is true. I just think there is physics. So why would we expect to see the PSR violated? I have no idea. Like, what?
You accept that the PSR doesn't always hold.
Well, again, I'm not following your argument here. You can have brute facts and no violation of the PSR. I don't get the question.
Detroit, could you explain this to me? I mean, am I stupid right now?
Yes.
Could you repeat the last thing you just said, TJump? You can have.
If we're counting brute necessity.
Yeah, so
I'll say-
you can have brute necessities, you can have brute facts, and not violate the PSR. You have multiple different brute necessity facts. Okay.
Okay, go ahead, TJump.
Yeah, Detroit, go ahead. What do you make of that?
Well, I mean, if our PSR is a statement about contingent facts, then that's consistent. I'm not sure on some on some terminology there aren't brute necessities kind of by definition. Brute means unexplained contingent, but it's irrelevant. I mean, that's all fine. But Canadian's point is that a denial of the principle as he believes it, using modality as he is, has some skeptical concerns. And I'm not sure any progress has been made there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure what he's saying is that his version of the PSR, which leads to only the possible one necessary thing in all possible worlds, has some virtues that doesn't exist in the version I'm presenting. I haven't heard what those are yet, or why, or any evidence that his does have these virtues and mine doesn't, and that's kind of where I'm trying to what are they? Why do we think yours has them and mine doesn't?
I think one of the things he wants to say is that there's good reason to accept the principle that's false on your view and true on his.
What are those?
And some of those reasons have the principle being the PSR that he affirms, and
yeah, but what are the reasons to accept his definition?
Explanations.
Right. So, Tom, we're not making progress. So let me restate the traditional principle. Okay. Let me just restate it, and you offer your thoughts. And if you disagree, you disagree. That's fine. Okay. So let me offer a traditional way of presenting the principle. Okay. I'm just going to offer it here. You do whatever you want with it. Okay. For all contingent fact X. Okay. For every fact that holds in some possible world, there is a sufficient reason for why X happens. Okay. Do you have a problem with this principle?
Yes, so I'd say that there could be necessary things, and so I wouldn't say that any fact in just some possible worlds would itself just be contingent. I wouldn't define it that way. I'd say there can be necessary things in multiple possible worlds.
Okay, so Venus, do you agree? I mean, can you make sense of Venus? He says that there can be necessary facts that hold only in some possible worlds.
But we have to be clear what sort of modality he's accepting,
Venus-
because it's obviously not S5.
Yeah, I reject S5. I said that before. So where is there a logical contradiction in saying there is a being, essentially a god, who created the universe and was uncreated in that universe? Is there a logical contradiction in that statement anywhere?
Wait, could you just repeat the statement? I was paying attention, sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So
yeah, go ahead.
Is there a logical contradiction in believing that there are multiple universes, each has an uncreated god in it, and it created all of the contingent things in that universe?
I'm not sure why we're talking about the universe. I thought we were talking about possible worlds.
I'm talking about actual existing universe. I don't like possible world semantics. I'm supposing it's actually the case. There are two universes. These actually exist, and there are actually two gods in each of these universes, and they both are necessary uncreated things, or don't use the word necessary, uncreated things. They exist outside of space-time, or whatever you want to say uncreated as, and they created all the contingent things in their universes separately. Is there any logical contradiction in that?
Well, no, because what Canadians talk about is like possible worlds. It's not talking
Yes, I know.
about multitude of universes or something like
I know,
that.
I know, and that's
You're
that's
just
the
talking
whole,
past each other if that's the case.
I understand what he's trying to argue, and I'm trying to show here is my alternative. Why is this one less justified? Why does this one have the problems that you're saying it does? That's the
No one
point.
can make sense of it but you.
He just said there's no logical contradiction. He just said it made sense.
Well, if there's no, like, are you saying like in one universe, talking about the universe, are you saying like in one universe there's something we're calling a deity, and in another universe there's something else we're calling a deity, and there's nothing in either of those concepts that entails that there could only be one deity or there couldn't be the other deity? If that's the case, then there's no contradiction in saying that, but I don't think that's what he was pertaining to, Canadian.
Well, I know that's not what he's pertaining to. What I'm saying is he says there's this model and you have to accept this model or it has these consequences. So I'm saying to disprove that, I can prove another model that doesn't have those consequences. Therefore, your assertion that you need model 1 is false. So you would need to show why model 2 has these consequences.
Okay, so Venus, what's the difference? What's the difference between saying that there are these gods in some possible worlds and saying that there are certain brute facts that exist?
But he's not talking about possible worlds, so he's just talking about multiple universes in the same world.
So you're just talking about the multiverse? Where did that come from?
Right, that's what he's talking about. That's why I'm kind of confused. It just seems like you guys have been talking past each other.
Yeah, so there can be two gods that exist in two different dimensions, cosmoses, whatever you want to call them. I don't care. And they could both be uncaused. So they've eternally existed.
Okay, so what do you mean when you say something is contingent, Tom?
I don't care. Again, I'm going to keep going back to this example. Why is my model not as justified as your model? So mine has no...
Your model...
What?
You're the only person that can make sense of your model.
Everyone here understands what I've said. Everyone here understands. It's pretty simple. Two gods create two universes. They are the necessary things. They're both uncreated.
What's a universe? What's a universe?
We're trying to understand the modal claims.
I don't care about the modal claims. This is the problem here. So I don't care about the semantics. The semantics doesn't make a difference. Why would having one god in all possible worlds be less of a good justification than having two necessary beings? Where is the problem here? I don't care about your label. I don't care about your definition of necessary. Why is one better than two?
What do you mean when you say necessary?
I don't care about your definitions. Tell me, why is one god better than two?
How am I supposed to answer something that you're not providing definitions for?
Because I'm asking you. This is not about my definitions. I'm saying so one god, all possible worlds, two gods, two possible worlds. Where's the difference? Why is this bad?
It's not possible worlds.
I don't care about the semantics here. Tell me why one god is better than two.
I just want to say, I know you say like you don't care about semantics, but they're important insofar as we
not really. So this is
talking about the same thing or not, or whether you're making like incompatible claims or not.
Well, that's true. So, but it should be fairly obvious what I'm asking here. So there's no reason for semantics. The whole point of these semantic games brought up in these kinds of conversations is to detract from the actual issue. The actual issue here is, why is one god better than two? Why do you need one necessary thing that supersedes all other things and you can't have two? Where's the problem here? And I don't care about definitions. I want to know, why is one god better than two?
Okay, so if you have...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, if you have two gods, then you're admitting that theists are rationally justified in believing in at least one, right?
No. So again, the only argument here is saying that your theory of one necessary being that is the only possible grounding of all reality, it being the only one that doesn't have these consequences, is false. So I can prove that is false if I have a different theory that has two of those things, two similar whatever words.
Even if you have two, you have at least one that's necessary in all possible worlds.
The argument here isn't about theism here. The argument here is that you don't need your definition of a god, and you can still have all of the virtues without it. So your definition of God does not follow, is not the only one that can produce this kind of an outcome.
Okay, now we're again straying off the topic. I'm asking you, do you accept the principle that I provided? That for all
your principle is dumb.
Okay, you don't accept my principle. That's fine.
Show how two gods is worse than one.
Okay, I'm not talking about two gods. I don't know where we're going. What I was saying is, here's a principle that's going to guide us to there being at least one god, and thus justifying that it is reasonable for me to be a theist. Now, I provided a principle. You're saying you reject that principle. right? So if you reject that principle, then by definition, you're committed to some contingent facts that are unexplained, correct?
No, I don't even need to claim that at all. So again, you're the one claiming. Nope, not how the burden of proof works. So you're the one claiming this principle is true, and I don't need to claim that. I can just say I don't know if it's true. I don't accept it. It doesn't. It may or may not be true. I may not understand it. I don't have to make any claims whatsoever. If you can't show this principle you're claiming is true, it doesn't matter what I believe. It's irrelevant. You have no justification. What I believe does not in any way add to your justifications.
Okay, but then I'm just going to go through what I went again through, which is why
which
should
then leads
we
back to the question: why is one God better than two? Why can't you do it all with two gods, two different gods? Different...
Okay, we can do it with two gods, and
he could grant that you could, yeah.
Yeah, we could, and then theism is still rationally justified.
So again, that wasn't the counter argument here is that your principle that leads to this conclusion does not, rejecting this principle does not lead to all of the things you said. Here's an alternative that you can get all the things. Therefore, your claim that rejecting this principle leads to all these contradictions, all these problems is false. This isn't about theism here. This is just showing that your claim that this principle is false.
Look, just a second. Are you saying that there are two necessary beings?
Again, irrelevant. The semantics here are irrelevant. I don't care about the semantics. It's irrelevant. So if you can do with two gods what you can do with one, you can get rid of the consciousness and say it's not even a god. Nope, gone. No consciousness. It is a whatever word. I'm going to use the word necessary because it works. Multiple necessary things here that are not conscious. No God.
Okay, just a second. Let's try this again. You're saying, okay, because I'm getting confused. You're saying that I should provide reasons for why I accept the principle, right?
I guess, yes.
Good. Okay, good. So I'm just going to reiterate the principle and provide reasons now, okay? Which is what I did, but I guess there's a problem. So the principle states that for all contingent fact X, there's a Y that sufficiently explains the contingent fact. And contingent in this case means existing in some possible worlds. Now, why should we believe this, right? Sorry? Sure, go ahead.
I mean, merely some possible worlds, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So, existing in just some possible worlds. Okay, so why? There's different reasons. What are the virtues? One virtue is self-evidence, okay? But this is, again, not going to be very convincing, so we're just going to provide others. Well, one is we would expect the world to look different if the principle of sufficient reason didn't hold.
Okay, let's start with that one. So let's go with that one right now. So let's say that the principle of sufficient reason does not hold. There is no, there are multiple worlds with what you call contingent things that are uncreated. They have no cause, brute facts, whatever you want to call it. So the PSR does not hold, but all of the facts we expect to see are the exact same. Why would you think that this would make, we would expect different facts here? What evidence do you have to say that we would have different facts if there was a necessary thing in all possible worlds versus in a bunch of different ones?
Okay, I'm just going to direct the question. Why don't we experience those brute facts in the actual world?
I don't know what that means. So your claim is that you claim that we would expect the world to be different if there's one necessary thing versus the many that I propose. Why? What evidence is there of that?
Many necessary things.
I don't care about your semantics, Canadian. I don't care about. Tell me the difference. Why, if the PSR is wrong and there is not a single necessary thing as you suppose, would we expect the world to be different?
That there is a single necessary thing.
Don't care about your semantics. Answer the question, Canadian. Stop dodging. Answer the question. Why would there be a difference?
How am I supposed to answer gibberish?
It's obvious what I'm asking here. You're claiming that this principle is true. Stop, Canadian. You keep claiming that if this principle is true or not true, we would expect the world to look differently.
Yes.
Prove it. Because I can reject the principle and the world looks the exact same.
Okay. Why do you not have any examples of brute contingent?
Why are you asking me questions? Provide evidence that if the principle did not hold, the world would be different.
We would expect the world to have a brute contingent because the PSR doesn't hold.
That's circular. So again, you provided no evidence to say that we would expect the world to be differently if the PSR didn't hold. Show what is the difference we expect to see? Where is this? Show me a test that can show the difference.
Okay, so for each, I'm just going to provide the argument then from my notes. For each way that things could go in accordance with the laws of nature, there's an uncountable infinity of ways of arbitrary cardinality that things could, for no reason at all, go contrary to the laws of nature. For instance, if we deny the PSR, then for no reason at all, a cloud of photons n 9,314 in number could suddenly appear ex nihilo just near the moon heading for San Francisco. Because the cardinality is so high, some of the photons would have to share the same quantum state. But photons are bosons, so they should be able to do that. And the number of ways such things could happen seem to have no limit if the PSR fails. Now, what do you reject here?
That is irrelevant. Like, we don't know all the laws of physics, whether it's possible or not. It could be possible. It may not be possible. Maybe everything is necessary in the universe. I don't care. But what I didn't understand how, wait, I didn't understand how anything you said there is evidence. Stop. Canadian. I don't understand how anything you said there shows a difference between PSR versus non-PSR. What's the difference here? What are we expecting to see that we don't see?
A plethora of proof contingent facts.
Where would we see those? What rock do we look under to find those?
Well, that's the question to you because you're positing them. I'm
no,
not.
This is your claim. You claim that there would be a difference, or you expect a difference if there is the PSR versus the not the PSR. So you need to tell me what is the difference you expect so we can see it. Where are we going to see this difference? What is the difference?
Okay, a difference is we would expect, for example, brutally contingent black holes to be swallowing suns and stars.
Okay, and how would we show this?
By, for example, waking up one day and seeing that one of the stars got swallowed for no reason whatsoever.
I don't even know what that means.
Well, because you're not following, right?
Right, because so you claim there's some difference between PSR versus non-PSR, and you claimed the difference is black holes.
Okay.
Like, what?
Okay, I'm going to give it again. If the PSR is false for each way that things could go in accordance with the laws of nature...
Saying that again doesn't help me. So I didn't understand any of that the first time. I'm not going to understand it no matter how many times you read it. I want to know what is the difference. What is the difference? Simple terms. What is the difference between PSR versus non-PSR universe that we would expect to see? What is the expected difference that we would see?
We would expect there to be brutally contingent fact in the actual world.
How would we... Where would we see this?
All around us.
Okay, show me what this means. So you're saying we would expect to see something that we've never seen and can't see, even if it was there. We wouldn't be able to know if it was there.
We would be able to know it. So, for example,
how would we know if there's a contingent fact?
We could have brutally contingent computers appearing out of nowhere.
What? That doesn't make any sense at all.
Okay, then why doesn't it make sense? Why do you expect all computers to have some kind of causal explanation for them?
So it's like what your argument sounds like to me is if the floofy blah 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 principle. Wait.
Why doesn't it make sense if you accept that? I'm
trying to explain it. So what it seems like to me, why this does not make sense, is that it seems like you're saying I have a principle of blah 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 stupid stuff, and if my stupid stuff principle does not exist, then magical pink elephants will appear next to me. Magical pink elephants do not appear next to me, therefore my stupid principle is true. That's what your principle sounds like to me.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm telling you that for all ways that things can go in accordance with the laws of nature, there are an infinite number of ways they might not. So you are saying that according to the laws of nature, right, a computer... But now I'm asking you, if you reject this principle of sufficient reason, why is that a nonsensical scenario? That's what I'm asking. Why is it a nonsensical scenario to expect a brutally contingent computer to materialize?
Well, it could just be, given the laws of physics, they can't. That's a possibility.
But you're saying that, okay, wait, you're saying they can't?
Yes, that's a possibility. It's possible they can't just materialize out of nothingness.
You're saying can't or can? Sorry, I can't hear you.
Cannot?
Okay, they cannot because of laws of nature. Nice. Now, what prevents there to be a brutally contingent fact that does cause computers to materialize?
Well, if it didn't exist, that would do it.
Sorry, I can't hear what you're saying. Can you?
If it did not exist, that would be what presents it. It just doesn't exist.
What doesn't exist?
Brutally contingent fact that computers will materialize.
Okay, good. So you're saying that if brutally contingent facts don't exist, that would we wouldn't expect them. Right?
If there's like a brute contingent fact that computers can exist, and that one brute contingent fact didn't exist, then they wouldn't.
Okay, so what justifies you saying that brutally contingent fact doesn't exist?
I just said it could not exist. If it might not exist, then that would prevent computers from popping into existence.
Good. So how do you know that's not the case?
Why do I need to know that? That's not relevant to my argument. Epistemology isn't the claim here. We're talking about ontology.
Okay, but I'm repeating. Okay, let me try this again. When I presented a possible scenario, one possible scenario, you said that that's a crazy scenario. What is crazy about, for example, believing that there could be brutally contingent computers popping out of existence? What's so problematic?
So what I claimed was crazy was the fact that if you assume something that we already know doesn't happen will not happen, that's post hoc reasoning. And so using that as a justification for your novel principle is crazy. It's like saying, the sun will rise tomorrow, therefore the spaghetti monster exists. So claiming something we already have a good reason to believe is going to continue to be or not be the case. Therefore, your crazy new principle would be crazy.
Yeah, I'm lost. I'm not sure where we're struggling. Why is it that we don't see the violations of the PSR?
Again, you're the one claiming that exists and that we would expect to. So I don't even know. Like, we expect to see what we already see through induction. That's what we expect. And any violations of what we already see are things we don't expect.
Okay, the things that you see, could they all be a brutally contingent belief that was born into you 5 minutes ago?
Sure.
Okay, how do you know that's not the case?
Why do I need to? Why is this relevant?
Because that undermines your epistemology.
How again, you're not in any way explaining how this happens. Like, so
I just gave you a scenario. How do you know that's not the case?
I don't need to. Like, I'm not claiming to. That's not the point here.
And how do you have any justification for your beliefs if anything could just be a brutally contingent fact in your epistemology? How do you?
It's irrelevant. None of this is relevant. None of this makes theism justified. So the argument here is theism justified and rational? What I believe is irrelevant. Like, this isn't evidence.
I'm going to give an argument again. Then I'm going to give an argument again. Okay. Then I'm going to give an argument again for why it's justified, and you point out the problem. Okay. The argument goes like this. One is, okay, so I'm going to, there's a couple of assumptions. There's the principle of sufficient reason holds. If that's the case, okay, if that's the case, if the principle of sufficient reason holds, then the big contingent conjunctive fact would itself require explanation, and explanation for that cannot be a contingent fact itself, because that would be absurd. So we're bottoming out at a necessary fact, and that necessary fact we know to be God. What's the problem there?
It's gibberish. I don't really understand what it's saying. I'm still trying to understand the difference of why we think the PSR is true. So you gave a definition. I don't care about your definition.
Because of epistemic virtues that I just gave.
What? I didn't hear any epistemic virtues. I just heard a bunch of definitions that you came up with. So I'm still stuck on the part where you said...
Okay, rejecting the PSR renders your epistemology incoherent.
That's just by your definition. I don't care about your definition here. So what my worldview does is irrelevant. My worldview is irrelevant here. Referencing me does not make your worldview relevant at all, or reasonable. Not at all. So you're claiming that the PSR is true because if it wasn't, we would expect the universe to look differently.
Yes, that's one. That's one theoretical virtue.
Yes, and I'm claiming that that's just something you've made up. Like, no.
Okay, so then I'm asking you, why do you reject that if the PSR is false, there aren't infinitely many ways in which the laws of the universe could be violated?
That's, again, irrelevant. So I don't know why you're asking me questions here. You are the one making the claim. You need to provide evidence.
I just provided it after all.
Where? I missed it.
If the PSR fails, for each way that things could go in accordance with the laws of nature, there is an accountable...
That's not evidence. So where is the evidence that we would expect to see something different than what we already see? If the PSR was wrong?
Evidence. I'm giving a priori evidence.
A priori evidence that we would expect to see a posteriori differences in the universe?
Yes.
What?
I don't understand what the problem is. I'm just giving you reasons for why your position...
My position doesn't matter to your position. You can't criticize my position and say yours is reasonable because mine isn't. Irrelevant. So it's a... which fallacy does. Burden-proof fallacy? Yes. So my question is that your claim is that if the PSR is false, the universe will look differently. And your evidence for this is that... A priori reasons. You're saying a priori reasons give you reason to expect a posteriori differences in the universe, which is a contradiction, but okay.
Why is that a contradiction?
Yeah, why is that a contradiction?
Because a priori means it doesn't actually tell you anything about a posteriori things in the universe. You can't get apples from a priori knowledge. You need some a posteriori reference to sense experience or objects.
Go ahead.
So what was the claim again exactly? That a priori evidence what?
And tell us that give us a reason to expect there's going to be a posteriori differences in the universe if the PSR is true versus not true.
If by a posteriori evidence, all we mean is things we can verify by observation, but there's no conflict there. If by a posteriori evidence we mean things only verifiable a posteriori, then yes, of course, there'll be a contradiction in saying that there's something knowable a priori.
So it seems like what he's saying is that
something a posteriori.
Well, that's what it seems like he's saying. He's saying that he's like giving scientific examples of particles and computers and stuff. So he's saying things that we can verify with our sense experience would be different if the PSR was false. It seems like what he's saying.
Right. No, but that's consistent with the former sense, right? It's making this, it has empirical consequences that we can derive a priori.
How?
It's not like, there's nothing inconsistent with that, right?
Well, you'd still need some a priori claim there, like about the universe. So that would still be a posteriori claim, even if it's an a priori justification for that a posteriori claim. But I'm claiming house. So where is the a priori justification that leads to a different empirical fact? What is the different empirical fact that we can expect to see? And I'm assuming it's got to be something that we don't already know, or else it's post hoc reasoning.
Well, he's saying that on the view which denies the principle, there's some expectation of
computers
perhaps
popping into
widespread
existence?
violations of that principle. Right. Things of that sort, at least.
So he's claiming
I'm not
that
defending that, but that's what he's saying.
Yeah, so he's claiming that, if my made-up principle is false, then the world's going to be completely different than everything we currently observe right now, which is post hoc reasoning. Like, congratulations, anyone can do that.
Well, I mean, Canadian, if you want to continue, I mean, the idea is going to be that if there are brutally contingent facts, there's, I guess, no reason to think that there's there won't be a great number of them. There's going to be at least some expectation that the things of our experience.
Why would that hold?
Are going to be those.
Why would we assume that if there are brute contingent facts, there isn't a finite number of them? Where does this number generator come in?
I never said infinite. I mean, it could
be.
Yeah,
infinite. Just like why would we assume there's 1 versus 80 billion versus infinite? Where does this assumption that if they do exist, there is a large number of them come from?
Well, one thing people say is that, like, if there's no sort of restriction on what sort of things can occur without any explanation, then that sort of thing just should be happening all the time. If it's not restricted.
Well, if it's not restricted, to assume there is a large number would be the exact same to assume a small number, just a gambler's fallacy.
Well, no, but just to say that there's to say that there's a small number is to say that there is some restriction.
No, like why would that hold? So like if you say there's a lot of them that's going to happen a lot for some reason, that would be, if there's no restriction, then the probability of a lot happening is exactly the same as the probability of very few happening. Why would there be a probabilistic difference if there's no restrictions?
No, for all I'm saying by restriction here, something which, or given which, it's not going to happen at some time. So, like, for example, take some time. Is there going to be something which sort of exists without any explanation at that time? If there's just no restriction on, if there's some restriction on what sort of things can exist brutally, then maybe not, right? I mean, that there could be some restriction given which such a thing would not exist at that time in that way. But if there's no restriction, then sure, it would exist at that time with no further explanation.
Sure, and why would we prefer one over the other? Why would one be more likely than the other?
Whether it's more or less restrictive?
No, whether the thing would exist in that way or would not exist in that way.
Well, if there's no restrictions on whether something can exist without explanation, then we would expect it, the scenario in which there are more things existing without explanation.
Why?
because the reverse is to say that there's some restriction on which things can exist without explanation.
No, like why would you assume that? The fact that there could be things that exist without explanation doesn't mean there will be things that exist without explanation.
No, but it's more likely.
Yeah, why? Why is it more likely?
Yeah.
It's principle of indifference.
How does that show it's more likely?
Do you know what the principle of indifference
How does that show
is?
it's more likely?
Do you know
Answer
what
the question or get out.
Do you know
Answer
what
the
it
question or get out.
Do you know what it is?
Mute him or kick him.
Yeah.
Toby, come on, don't be like that.
Me? God.
So either answer
Yeah.
the question or get out.
Just answer the question.
I'm not answering a question if you don't know the principle.
Okay, kick him out. Get him out of here. Like, bye-bye. Like, if you make a claim, you got to defend it. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I mean, I'm defending something that I don't really believe here, so grain of salt, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
Where were we?
Why would it be
so
this idea that there are brute contingent facts that this makes it likely that they're going to happen all over the place? Doesn't seem to follow.
Well, if they're look, if we could deny the PSR, but think that there's some restriction on what sort of things can be contingent or brutally contingent.
Well, I understand.
Or if,
like, adding in a restriction would obviously be a problem. So I'm not adding in a restriction here. I'm saying that why would we assume in any given object or location or any given collection of objects or location, the probability of something existing there for no reason would be greater than the probability of it not existing with no limitations? Like, why would the limitations?
if there's no restriction, if there couldn't be such a thing at that time and place, that's to say that there is a restriction on which sort of things can be brutally contingent.
Right. Saying it could not be the case would be a restriction for sure. But saying it could be the case also means that it might not be the case. So I haven't added any restrictions here. I just said it might not be the case that there are any brute contingent things anywhere in the universe. That's a possibility. They could exist, but they just may not exist in the universe. Where's the problem?
Well, here's one sort of argument you could make. Let's grant that it could be the case, could not be the case, right? That's just to say that there's some other way the world could have been, right, where there was a brutally contingent entity there, or fact about some entity there. Well, okay. What does this sort of landscape of worlds look like? Is it going to be one where there's a sort of average amount of brutally contingent facts is relatively small, or is it going to be, or are they going to be pretty widespread? Because the reason to think that it's going to be pretty widespread, and therefore if we're sort of indifferent about which one of those worlds ours is, we would expect that it would be widespread in the actual world too, is that look, take a some like constant volume. If like every point in there could give rise to some brutally contingent fact, or could not, in any given world, how many brutally contingent facts are you going to expect to see?
Wouldn't that be a restriction? So if you take any point and say this point, and you can just expand or subtract the size of the point, that would itself be a restriction, wouldn't it?
No, it's not a restriction on the principle. I'm just looking at a portion of the universe to make an example.
Right. Right. So that's the claim, is that if you assume there is any portion of the universe in which this could happen, let's say an inch versus a foot versus a mile versus the entire scope of the universe, those would seem like they would be some kinds of limitations that we wouldn't know whether they were or were not the case. Like, obviously, if you assume a brute contingent fact could occur every 1 second in every 1 inch of the universe, yes, we would expect them to happen probably all the time, for sure.
Right. Even if they don't happen at all the locations in the actual world.
Right, but that itself would be a limitation. And assuming to have some kind of limitation like that, where it could apply at any point or may not apply at any point, seems to weigh the argument in your favor by applying a limitation that makes your outcome probable.
So wait, what is the limitation that you're advocating? I'm not quite following.
Well, I'm saying that in your example, you're applying a limitation in which a brute contingency popping things into existence would be highly likely because there's just a mass of possible things. It could be anywhere, any inch, any second. Whereas if you apply a different limitation, brute contingent things popping into existence can only happen once in every 10 billion light years and only in every 7 million seconds or something.
To say that is to say there's a restriction on the sort of things that could be brutally contingent past.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, is that if you pick whichever restrictions you want, like the restrictions that you're describing of one every single point in the universe versus a restriction of a very large restriction of only one per universe, that changes the outcome.
Mine's not a restriction in the same way.
Well, that's the thing. Is why would one of these be more likely than the other? That's the question here. Why would it be more likely that this kind of restriction that you're describing, where it could be where considering brute facts would be relevant at every single point in every single second, versus considering brute facts?
Yeah, well, the restriction I'm having is not really a restriction at all. It's as permissive as possible.
Right, and that's
anything could in principle be a brute fact, and that's not ruled out by our denial of the principle of sufficient reason.
Right. So that's the point here, is that if you're saying that brute facts may or may not apply at any scale, then there's no reason to think they would apply at this scale versus that scale, because that would be a restriction. So yes, it's a possibility that brute facts could apply in the way that you're describing it. And it's also possible they don't, because they don't have a restriction in that way. So obviously, if it was the case that they applied at the scale you're describing it, we could expect to see that. So if we had any evidence of that, that would be great. But we don't. So it's just as likely that they apply at the scale I'm describing for no particular reason, in which case we wouldn't expect to see a difference.
But hang on. Are you saying that at a particular scale that I'm talking about, which is just, I mean, I'm not talking about any scale in particular. I'm just
I understand
all scales. If for a given thing that we think could have been the case, suppose I think the world could have been this way, that such that at this, I don't know, really precise small scale, this fact could have obtained, and it could have obtained without any explanation. Are you saying that maybe there was a restriction and that couldn't have really obtained?
Well, no, so I'm not saying there's a restriction. I'm just saying at random, it could randomly, with no restriction, only apply at this scale, or it could randomly only apply to this scale. So there's not a restriction there.
But sounds to me like that's just saying that it could have been that the actual world is one in which the things at that scale all have explanations. But that's to say, either to say that the actual world is sort of atypical among all the possible worlds in this way, or that there is some sort of restriction on which things could be brutally contingent.
No, again, so there's no restriction here. It could just be randomly the case that brute contingent facts just don't happen. No restriction, they just randomly just don't happen, and that's one of the possibilities. So there's no restriction saying that's the case. And so if there's infinitely many...
That was the first option I just provided.
Right. So if there's infinitely many to the right where they could happen at every single Planck length of the universe, and infinitely many to the left where none could happen ever, we have no reason to prefer one over the other.
Here's the point. This is why I said this was the first reply. Is you could just say they just don't happen to occur on those scales, and of course that's consistent. Given the things we've committed to, that might be a possible world. It's just going to be incredibly atypical, and so we might think that for worlds with observers like us, in the possible worlds of obeying these rules, we should expect with unimaginably high credence that the actual world is not one of those worlds, unless we have some other reason to, in fact, think that the world is atypical in that way. That wouldn't be question begging. You kind of suppose, as an analogy, people often point this out about fine tuning. Is there a possible world which has all the constants in this exact, precise way that permits for the existence of life? I mean, yes, But
let me ask this way: it's possible for a brute contingency to exist, which is its own limitation. It has a nature which is limited.
it's possible for a brute contingency to exist, which has its own limitation.
Or the limitation is the brute contingency, or something like that. There's like a brute contingent thing that happens.
So the fact that things are limited in a certain way is itself a brutely contingent fact?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's consistent.
So it would be possible that if a universe existed with this brute contingent thing that has a brute contingent limitation, there are brute contingencies, but we'd expect the universe to look exactly the same as we see it, with no differences. None of the computers popping into existence in this case.
Right, but I mean, the concern is going to be the same. Why are we expecting that sort of story about what things are brutally contingent over any other? It seems like there's a great number of more kind of worlds which have brutally contingent things.
Sure, but I'm happy with that. I can just say, okay, so we can say there are brute contingencies. Don't expect any differences, none whatsoever. So that's essentially the main point there. I mean, I don't even need to grant the first premise of the argument. Like, brute contingencies don't make a difference here. The whole problem with Canadian's argument is that saying we expect to see the things we already see and no difference from the things we already see, just post hoc reasoning. So it doesn't make a difference here. But thank you for the clarification. I was interested in that understanding of what he meant by brute contingencies being relevant here, more probable.
Right. As Canadian, if you want to continue, because I'm the things I'm saying, most of them I think are wrong anyway. So it's just for the sake of argument.
So let's take a different approach. I mean, I guess we'll have to round up soon because I mean we've been going for close to 2 hours.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna make one more, and then I think we can just open up the room. And if people want to ask you any questions, that's totally fine. So my one question would be, let's just try it this way. Let's say that there is several possible scenarios, right? What is it that makes one scenario preferable over another? So let's say we have scenario 1, where the cause of the universe is personal, and scenario 2, where the cause of the universe is impersonal. Okay, and now I'm using the word universe not to refer to. Okay, I don't like the word universe.
Yeah, I understand. Principle of charity.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, because the universe just means.
You said that like 20 times. We get you.
Yeah.
All right. So let's say that there is an impersonal cause and impersonal cause, right? And you, as an agnostic atheist, are saying, okay, I'm just not taking any position. But what makes the position that someone commits to it being an impersonal cause better than someone committing to it being a personal cause? What is it that makes one preferable over the other?
A priori, nothing. I wouldn't say anything a priori would make a difference there, but I'd say a posteriori evidence. So I'd say that given our evidence of science that particles don't seem to be conscious, consciousness only seems to be a product of brains, it's reasonable to conclude whatever the fundamental nature of reality is more like the particles than the brains. So induction would lead towards that conclusion.
Okay. So I think this is where we should engage with the philosophy of mind. So I am a Cartesian dualist, and I'm sure you know what Cartesian dualism is, but basically I believe that there is a strict separation between the mental substance and the physical substance. And my argument for this is very simple. It's actually not my argument. I was just, gotten this formalization, which is that if, for example, our minds are just our bodies, right, then it would be impossible for our minds to exist without our bodies, okay? But it is not impossible that our minds exist without our bodies. Therefore, our minds are not just our bodies. Now, what would be your objection there?
Well, I'd say, is it like possible for minds to exist without bodies? Hypothetically, yes. But if all that we are just our brains, then obviously we, as we are in this universe, could not exist without our bodies.
Okay, good. So now what I'm saying is there any logical contradiction in a mind existing without a body?
No, I'm granting that. Happy.
Okay, good. All right, but shouldn't we expect a contradiction if our minds are just our brains?
No, unless we assume that our minds are the only kinds of consciousness possible.
Oh, so you're admitting that there is nothing wrong with a consciousness without
Yeah,
body.
sure. Ghosts logically possible, gods logically possible, spirits logically possible. No problem.
Okay, so what makes the hard atheist scenario more preferable than the
The
theist?
hardy theist, the what?
The type of atheist that takes a position and says God doesn't exist, and the cause of the universe, in the second sense, is impersonal. And then there's the other one, and okay, the fundamental nature is a mind. What makes one preferable rather than another?
The inductive evidence that minds only seem to come from brains. So I wouldn't say a priori there would be a problem there. I'd just say that the a posteriori evidence we have of science says that's probably not the case. It'd be like saying it'd be like if I said an apple was the origin of the universe. Like that would be silly.
But aren't you begging the question there? Like, I mean, what are you saying inside? Okay, so like, isn't that a dispute that, for example, the mental stuff isn't caused by the physical?
Not really. Not in most academic fields.
So why would I, as a Cartesian dualist, concede that the mind is just an emergent property of the body?
I have no idea what you would do. If you're asking, is it more reasonable? It would be objectively more reasonable to base your conclusion off of the abundance of evidence that we have, rather than to interpret it.
What in the abundance of evidence? Okay, so like I'm not. See, the point is that I think that either way it has to be a priori, because obviously there will be two ways to interpret the evidence, right? One way to interpret the evidence is that science, of course, provides an account of the mind, but another would be that the science has simply provided an account for what's called as the easy problem of consciousness.
Right.
Well, the art is still. So what I'm asking is, how are you not begging the question when you're saying, okay, empirically we've already established it, when that's what it's dispute?
Yeah, because all the evidence shows that physical interactions can affect the mind, but the mind can't seem to affect physical interactions.
The mind can't affect physical interactions?
Yeah, like I can't lift the TV up with my mind. I can't pop unicorns into existence. I can't use the force. I can't use my mind to do stuff.
You can raise your arm with your mind, right?
I would say I'm strict determinist, so no. But so I can say that I can control someone else's thoughts by sticking an electrode in their brain and shocking them, and they can't do anything about it. So the physical stuff overrides the mental stuff, but the mental stuff can't override the physical stuff. So it seems like the physical stuff seems to have priority by a significant margin.
But wait, your mental states have some influence in the world, right?
Not directly. So I'd have to use my mental states to affect my brain. That's fine, but I think those are synonymous. So if they don't do anything outside of my brain, which is what I mean by the world. So external world. The external world can affect my mind. My mind can't seem to affect the external world.
Well, I mean, do you think that you're... If by affect there, you mean like have some direct influence on?
Yeah, like the Force, like Star Wars.
Right. But that's not what anyone's committing themselves to.
Yeah, I didn't say it was. So I'm saying that if we just interpret the evidence in the most generous way possible, it seems like physical stuff affects our brains very, very well, our minds, but not the other way around. There seems to be a far less significant causal role the other way around.
Wait, so you're saying that the mental...
What if they're identical?
Go ahead.
No, that's it.
Yeah, so you're saying that the mental doesn't cause anything physical?
Like I would say significant. So you could say it could cause some physical things, like it maybe brain states, and the brain states then cause all the physical stuff outside of the brain states. But I wouldn't say even if we grant dualism, the mental stuff does nothing outside of the brain, as far as I can tell. And then only the physical stuff pretty much runs everything. So the physical stuff seems to have a significantly higher level of importance and supersedes the mental stuff by such a significant margin.
So, okay, is this some kind of either property dualism or just epiphenomenalism?
Oh, I'm just granting dualism for the sake of the argument. So it's just, even if we grant dualism and say there
okay,
are...
but you're not granting like substance dualism. You're granting some kind of property dualism, right?
I don't care. I could grant either. I could say that yes, there are actual souls like inside of your brain. I'm happy with that. We can just grant that for the sake of the argument.
So then, what's the problem with there being a mind being fundamental to the universe?
Remember, I said there wasn't one. There's not an a priori problem. The reason that you would conclude the reason you would conclude it's material is because the material supersedes the mental. The material seems to control the mental, but not the other way around. Or there is a much significantly larger control the physical has over the mental, vice versa. Therefore, it's more reasonable to conclude the physical is more fundamental to reality. Like if you take a block of cards and you take out the bottom card, the whole thing collapses. If you take out the top card, nothing happens. It's more reasonable to think the bottom card is more fundamental.
Yeah, go ahead, Detroit.
Someone could agree that this is true when it comes to our minds, but to say that it's true about like the mental in general is going to beg the question against this.
Not really, because we just don't have any evidence of minds outside of us. The only evidence we have is our minds, and our minds, all minds we know of, seem to be very limited control of the physical. To assume there's another one there, we have no reason to believe that. We do have lots of reason to believe there's other physical stuff that we don't know about.
Well, a lot of theists are going to say that we do have reason to think that there is such a mind, and that's going to be
like what?
Via various arguments.
Yeah, I don't think the arguments are going to count as much evidence here.
People present.
They can try that. I think it's garbage.
That's where the conversation goes then.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've covered a lot of ground there. So, I mean, well, what do you think is the most productive? Could we open up the room and see what the audience thinks, or?
Yeah, it sounds good. It was good chatting with you. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you. Frank, thank you so much for suggesting this. Thanks, Tom, for doing this.
Destroyer. And I wanted to mention I'd like to open my channel up for more debates with people in my server and in your server for like cross-platform debates between our groups, communities. That would be cool.
Yep, I'm happy. I have like a lot of members, around 3,000. I'm more than happy to host any debates, as long as like you're open, because I'm against people that are closed-minded or just ban everybody, but you seem to be pretty libertarian in that sense, so I'm more than happy to advertise your content.
Cool, thank you.
So yeah, let's open up.
I actually gotta go to the bathroom real quick. I will be back in a moment.
All right. So Frank, Scotty, thank you for coordinating this. Thank you, Detroyer. Not you, Tofi, because you fucked me over like you always do. But the rest of you, thank you. I thought it was a great event. It was Frank's idea, or at least he suggested to me. Scotty, Frank, I hope we didn't disappoint. So yeah, I thought.
Thanks for coming, man. Appreciate it.
No worries. Don't mention it. Thanks for the. Thanks to the audience in both the YouTube and here, the live audience. And yeah, I think Frank, now is the best time to open up the room, kind of let other people chime in and get the conversation going.
So the way we'll do that is, if anybody wants to ask a question,
just raise your hand.
Request to speak, raise your hand, and we'll bring them up on the stage, and they can give their question or their comment.
Could I add something on from an earlier part of the discussion? Like, it seemed that a lot of the modal discussion just got lost under cross-talking. I never quite got clear on, like, Tom was willing to use these terms like necessary, impossibly, impossible world, although that kind of got a little bit confused later. But we don't do that sort of independently of any sort of logic or like worked out semantics for those terms. I mean, what is necessary supposed to mean? Maybe, and if he has some sort of restricted modal logic in mind, because clearly he didn't accept S5, then that would have been fine. But then they just would have been talking past each other for the discussion, since Canadian is assuming sort of S5 when he presents his principle and the definition of God. So yeah, that never seemed to get clear to me, unless I missed something.
Yeah, there was some problem with semantics stuff. I mean, I am generally fine with S5 criticisms, but that has to be a priori, like, agreed upon, because, like, yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, there's a lot of problems.
And the point about, like, okay, well, could two gods do it? Whether we're talking about gods in two different possible worlds, or gods in, the same world but sort of spatially disconnected universes. on Canadian's view, or so far as the argument he presented went, that would be fine, so long as that view didn't require denial of the principle he had in mind. And so it's not as if his conclusion was, therefore, there has to be one and only one God. He was arguing for there being some necessary fact which had, or necessary being which had the properties that he was arguing for. If there were more, or that had properties like not consistent with the Christian God, I mean, that's something else that would be discussed further in the conversation. It wasn't really relevant at that point.
Yeah, I think.
Can I ask a question, please?
Hey, Brenda, how's it going?
My question is for CC. He said he was a Cartesian dualist.
Yep.
Are you a property dualist?
No, but I nobody has explained to me what property dualism is, so I'm like holding the hope for the future that if somebody explains it to me like coherently, I might accept it. But for now, I'm just happy to say it.
So you're a substance. You're a substance dualist.
I would say so.
I can't hear you.
Descartes is like the
Yeah.
archetypal substance dualist.
Yeah,
right? So like if
he said
he's a
yes.
Cartesian
He said
dualist.
yes, he is a substance dualist.
Okay. So how do two substances? There's one is mind, the other is body. How do they interact?
But what do you mean how?
Claim.
I mean, there's a mutual relationship. One influences the other, and the other influences.
Yes, they interact. How?
Yep.
How?
I'm not sure what the how there picks out.
What is your do you accept Descartes' definition of a substance? What is a substance for you?
I mean, I don't have a new version of substance ontology.
Well, Descartes did. Descartes did. I assume if you're a Cartesian dualist, you accept his definition of substance.
I would say, yeah, I accept neo-Cartesian definition.
So can two substances interact?
Yeah, that's what substance dualism is.
Can they?
Yeah, that's what substance dualism is.
Is that true in Descartes' notion of a substance, that two substances can interact? Is it?
I mean, Descartes thought there was. Unless there's something consistent about his model.
Well, I'm sort of alluding to Princess Elizabeth's objections to Descartes, which is she says that two substances cannot interact because they're two substances.
That doesn't really explain.
Okay, you're just wasting time. Anyway, I
actually think it's a relevant question. Like, if there are two substances that are completely separate from one another, is the interaction like, do both substances exist in some kind of a space-time continuum and can cause things in the other space-time continuum somehow?
I'm not especially willing to commit to any one view, right? I mean, there's an interpretation. Go ahead, sure. But yeah, there is an interpretation that there is a physical part where they interact. But I mean, I don't see why I have to commit to either one or the other.
Well, because a substance is something that is basic, right, and is independent logically and causally from other things. So if you have two substances, they are logically and causally independent of each other.
Why would we accept this causal independence?
That's part of the definition of substance that we're talking about. It's causal independence. That's what it means to be a substance.
That would kind of be begging the question, because if you say if you accept that definition, if you accept that definition of substance, that they are causally independent, then Canadian Catholic would just have to say he's not a substance dualist in that sense, because he would be using the word substance in a different way.
That's certainly not what he means, or what
that's what I
means,
just.
any
That is what some people mean by substance. Is that
not anyone who's in substance
causally basic? It's causally basic. That's what it means to be a substance.
I'm not sure what causally basic means.
It means that
no one who's a substance dualist would affirm.
It means that it persists through changes. It persists.
So Brenda, if you want to debate with me, I mean, we can debate later, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So let me give you an example. So the substance of H2O of water is H2O. H2O persists through changes to water, whether it's in liquid, solid, or gaseous state. It's still H2O, right? So the unless if there is an interaction that destroys H2O, it's no longer water. It's no longer the substance of water. That's what it means to be a substance.
That's fine, right? But that says nothing about whether it can enter into causal relations either as effect or cause. It's perfectly consistent with that.
Right, because the state of being solid, liquid, or gas for H2O, it hasn't really entered into a causal relation with other things, right? It hasn't been annihilated. It hasn't. Well, it hasn't. Right. It hasn't really interacted. It's simply been in a different state where it's no longer, for instance, forming a solid, forming a liquid, or forming a gas. It's still H2O.
My understanding of substance
still be H2O and do things to other things. It can have effects in the world. I just don't.
My understanding of substance dualism was that the two substances are essentially primary features of the universe, kind of like the theory that water and fire and air are all fundamental forces. Substance dualism says that consciousness is a fundamental force and matter is a fundamental force.
Yeah,
but I don't think there's any requirement
there's
for
two
causal
types of things, right? There's the extended things, like the stuff in space, right? Reza extends or whatever he extends. How does he put it? Whatever. And then the thinking stuff, the res cogitans, whatever. Those are the two different sorts of substances that he's affirming, and they interact with each other in some way.
Yeah.
I mean, he had this weird view about how the mind, the point at which they interacted was in the pineal gland.
I don't have. But, I'm not committing to anyone whether the interaction happens in the physical sphere. I mean, I don't have any separate.
Well, then how do you deal with the interaction problem? Because it is an issue for Cartesian dualism.
I mean, I don't have any special new views, right? I mean, I address it as the way as being traditionally addressed.
I mean, what is the way in which it's traditionally addressed?
How causal relations work is still a bit mysterious, and he doesn't exactly how how these things are causally related, or if there even is some further account to be given.
Well, so CC says,
but that doesn't seem like it's.
CC says he deals with it the way it's traditionally dealt with. What is that?
I don't understand what the how and there is supposed to mean, right? I explained already. There is a mutual influence that goes on, and we have the evidence of that in a body. I don't know what further account I can give. I don't give any further account. Somebody's thinking in general.
So you just say you don't know. That would be the answer.
Yeah, I guess. That's good. Yeah. Right. So, Scotty, can you bring James up on the stage?
So that seems to be a problem with your view, then. You have something that's unexplained in your view.
Well, I mean, that might be a cause, but there might be a good reason to adopt something which, given which there's other things which have not been aren't well explained. Because if we have good reason to think that, the mind exists, but it's not some sort of physical substance, well, that's going to be a good reason to posit some other sort of substance. Now, that could lead to other questions or concerns.
Like dark matter,
I think
dark energy kind of thing.
I think the inability to explain things is a good reason not to adopt a view.
Well, it's something that could count in that favor, right? But
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but on the balance, it may still come out that we should adopt the view.
So I think the argument is that you're right. You're right that because the dualists can't explain that is a weakness of their view, but they claim that there are bigger weaknesses in materialism. There's other things they can't explain, and those things are a bigger problem. That's usually the justification.
Okay. Anyway, James, go ahead. What was the question you had for TJump? James is a modal logician, Tom.
Yeah, so Tom, I was just if you could clear up your notion of modality that you're using.
Nope, because I
So I
don't
noticed
care
you were-
about the semantics one bit.
Okay, well, maybe you could just inform me what you mean when you say that something's necessarily the case or possibly the case, because I'm not clear.
So in this context, I'm using necessary as just an uncaused cause.
Okay, so you're saying like a proposition is necessary if and only if it's an uncaused cause, or
Essentially, yeah, that would be the simplest way to express it. So you can have multiple uncaused causes that all created their own universes.
So presumably a cause isn't going to be a proposition. So I don't know if it makes too much sense to like
proposition
append like a modal operator onto a cause. Well,
what?
Typically we say like a proposition is necessarily the case, right? It doesn't really make sense to say like a cause is going to be necessary in that same sense. I'm just going to say like the cause is necessarily existent or something. Is that what you're saying? Or
yeah, there'd be some statement which asserts the.
I don't care about any of the semantics here. All I care about is
just
the minimum definition of necessary that I'm using is an uncaused cause, kind of like the definitions they use for God, just without the modal aspects to it.
That's how I interpret statements about like necessary beings and stuff. When we say that there's necessary being, we mean is that there's some sort of existential claim which asserts the existence of that sort of being that is necessary.
Right, of course. I just wanted to clarify that's what he meant. And then also, I have one more question pertaining to modality. So I'm just wondering what your criticism of S5 modal logic is. And we don't need to go back and forth on this. I just want to hear what your
the semantics are very confusing. So I think that when you say something is possibly necessary, then it is necessarily the case. I think that causes an equivocation between the colloquial uses of possibly and necessary, which makes it very confusing and hard to make coherent arguments that most people can understand. So I don't think it's a valuable enterprise when used in public discourse.
Okay,
or
I see.
The criticisms that Nathan Salmon has made. That's what he had in mind.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
All right, well, those are the only questions I had. Thanks for entertaining me, TJump, and I thought the debate was kind of funny, so I appreciate that. I'll see you guys later.
Yep, see ya.
So, Canadian, if the principle of sufficient reason holds, then why are there differences in multiple possible worlds?
Okay, so that's a big topic, I guess, but
good question. Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not trying to dismiss. That's a wonderful question, and I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Ed Phaser. So you have to understand what an ontology of an explanation is, right? So this is the common criticism that people direct to it, right? Now, what's the ontos? I'm joking. I'm just joking. So here's the thing. On the principle of sufficient reason, could a necessary fact explain a contingent fact? Okay, so my statement, my view of explanation says that it's possible. So something could provide a sufficient explanation, as in make intelligible. That's what explanation means in my view. A contingent fact, right? So for example, we still could have indeterminism that has a sufficient explanation, something that makes it sufficiently intelligible. So that's why possible worlds exist. And the prime example is something like, for example, a left photon actualizing rather than right photon, right? I think there is a quantum mechanics problem where we might not know where the particles are, right? So, for example, if we were to find a sufficient explanation which says that, you know what, there is this mechanism that about 70% of the time generates a right photon. That's a non-entailing explanation that provides sufficient grounds for explaining a fact. So let me sum all of this up. The reason why there are possible worlds is because there are necessary propositions that explain contingent propositions. So that's the short version of it. But for the larger person, I think I'm not the best person. I mean, the best person for this would be either Rob Koons, which Tom interviewed in a prior episode. He's a wonderful man.
2 or 3 times, I think.
2 or 3 times. He's a wonderful professor of philosophy. He's a Thomist. I believe he's a Catholic too. And Ed Phaser would be the next one. So those would be the best to consult on this topic of what the ontology of explanation. And Proust. Proust would be the most amazing source. I've talked with Bruce. So the short version is there are possible worlds because necessary propositions explain contingent propositions.
Well, the word sufficient here becomes slippery, right? Because, well, when is something sufficiently explained? It's coming real close to it being a brute fact, right? It's just something that can happen and also cannot happen. So it seems weird.
From an Aristotelian point of view, it really is a mistake to suppose that the first. So it's a mistake to suppose in the first place that causality entails determinism. Okay, so for a cause to be sufficient to explain its effect, it is not necessary that it cause it in a deterministic way, right? It doesn't have to be deterministic. The only requirement is that it makes the effect intelligible, and that can
something that's unexplained about the effect, right? There's something that's unexplained.
Okay, but that's again going to come down to whether all explanations are entailing.
But then the principle of sufficient reason, well, it's at least slippery, right? Because it's not a complete reason.
No, I understand, but that's because your ontology of explanations is not in line with Aristotelian point of view.
Yeah, so a philosopher. So
that's fine. That's fine. No, you're asking a wonderful question. Like this is, I'm not putting it down. Like you're asking this is like an amazing question you're asking. Like the fact that you caught this is amazing.
Well,
can I ask a question about your notion of explanation?
You're going to ask me a question?
Yeah.
Who are you asking?
Okay.
Ask you who.
Oh,
right, go ahead.
So you're talking about that 70-30 case where, it happens 70% of the time, and that kind of makes it intelligible. Suppose it was 99.9 and 0.1. And, well, some of the time it's going to be that 0.1, right? Is saying that, well, it happened, I mean, it can happen 0.1% of the time. Is that enough to make it intelligible?
I think so, yeah.
Seems like.
And what if the limit?
I mean, if that's your system of explanation, it just seems like a lot of people might not find that.
No, that's fine, yeah.
It can happen, right? And the distribution is just like 0.000, well, maybe not unlimited, but a billion things that can happen. And just one of them happens. You still think that's a sufficient reason?
Okay, so it's all going to boil down to whether you accept there are such things as indeterministic explanations. So some people are just going to deny this and saying that no, all explanations are deterministic. I'm saying that there are indeterministic explanations of quantum physics, which seem to still have scientific explanations, right? I mean, I think that your world becomes way more complicated if you do not accept that there are explanations on indeterminism. Because, like,
wait, doesn't that go against the consensus in physics, which accept that randomness is fundamental?
Well, I mean, the consensus. So again, what they mean by randomness is indeterminism. So I agree in that sense. If randomness means indeterminism, I'm fine with that.
So in physics, the poll of the physicists, I forget what it's called, actually asks them, do they think it's just indeterminism or is randomness a fundamental part of the universe? And the majority say it's a fundamental part of the universe. They don't just mean indeterminism. They think randomness is a thing.
Okay, then I have to look at that poll because I mean, I'm not.
Well, that's just going to be yes. I mean, most working physicists, when polled on the matter, accept some sort of indeterministic interpretation of quantum mechanics, like Copenhagen.
I also accept an indeterministic explanation. I'm just saying whether you could still have explanations on indeterminism. That's the question.
I mean, on your view, you should be able to, right?
Yes, that's the point. So I accept. I mean, I'm not really trained in quantum mechanics, but what I'm saying is that I accept the Copenhagen version. That's the one that Kuhn's defends. And I'm fine with like an indeterministic account, which is the consensus. I just still think that we can nail down something that makes the effects intelligible. But if there's a other poll that would, for example, show that no, it's not just indeterminism, they're saying there is no explanation, then I would be interested to see that.
That's actually the case. So even though they accept the Copenhagen interpretation, which is the model is indeterministic, their beliefs about the ontology is that randomness is fundamental, and the poll is the fundamental attitudes in physics poll.
Yeah, I'd have to look it up.
But the whole big virtue about your system was that you had a sufficient reason, right, to explain things.
Yeah.
Now it just sounds like it's a kind of weak claim where you can just partially explain why things happen, right? You can't
Well, again, I actually used to have a modified version of the principle, and I still do, which is that all facts have at least a partial explanation. But when I spoke with Bruce, he like convinced me that, you know what, no, even the original PSR doesn't have this problem. And what I discovered from writings of Phaser and others is that, oh, maybe I was wrong about the ontology of explanations. So I mean,
I don't know what the
Well, yeah. So I think this was a great chat. I had a fun time. Thank you to Scotty, Frank92. I'll have to go and eat a little bit because I haven't eaten. But I'm looking forward to maybe other future events or whatever comes up. Just keep me in loop and let me know whatever else comes up. I'll be more than happy to do it if I can.
Thanks, Canadian. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. Thanks to Troyer, Jack, Venus, Timber, everybody, Scotty, Frank, thank you for organizing the event, letting me know. Dutch Idiot, Brenda, Platinum, nice to see you again. Darwin's Greatest Hits, especially you. Tom, well, partial thing. Yeah, they made it. They made it fun. All right, see you guys, and it was a fun event.
See ya.
Yep.
All right, guys, I got to start prepping for my modern day debate thing tonight. I'm going to head out too. It was fun. Good chatting with you. Look forward to future events.
Hey, Tom, thanks for
debating?
joining.
I'm debating flat earthers.
Oh, that's great. Have fun.
Yep. See you guys later.
I'm going to start drinking now.